Well, greetings everybody, and welcome back to this week's Inworld review, where it is the 15th of October of 2017, just to make sure we got it right. And this is the show where we talk about what we call the metaverse, the combination of virtual world spaces that are participatory, engaging places, social worlds, if you like. We ourselves are based on a simulated structure called OpenSim, the key point of which is something called a hypergrid that allows grids all over the world to connect together, just like web pages connect in your web browser. So you can jump here, there, and everywhere, as indeed we do when we're preparing this show. Today, we do seem to be missing one guest who was going to be joining us from Greek Life Grid. We've got lots of pictures of his grid to show you, but we don't have him to talk over them. So whether he is able to join us during the proceedings or not, I don't know. But we do thankfully have two other guests to keep you happy. Both of these guests have been on the show before. First of all, we have Leslie Kling from Tangle Grids. So welcome, Leslie.
Well, thanks, Mel, for inviting me back again. Always a pleasure.
Indeed. And I usually start. I should point out we have James Atloud here, who is on the chair, so to speak, but also wonderfully multitasking on operating all our cameras. So welcome, James.
Thank you, Mel. I think people are getting a sense of my name now, so... Been here a while.
Indeed. All right. And our main guest this week, so to speak, is also somebody who's been on before, but we'll actually be talking a little bit about commerce and things like that. And my recollection is on the last show, it was back when Maria was my co-host, and I think she probably asked all the questions, being as they were commerce-based. But he's been with us once before, and he's back with an update. He runs a company called Globit, amongst other things, and his name is Chris Colosi. So welcome, Chris.
Hi, thank you for having me on today. Welcome.
Fine. So, hard to know where to start here. I'm not going to ask Leslie for a roundup on Tangle Grid yet, but just so that we can announce it as a starter point, so to speak, I'm going to put up one of our images here, which Leslie's brought with her, and it's the advertisement for the Halloween Expo, which, believe it or not, started this very day, I believe. Or was it yesterday? I don't know. No, yes, it's today, the 15th. There you go. And it's going to be on for just over a month. Do you want to quickly summarize what's happening there with the expo, Leslie?
Yeah, what it is that anybody on the hypergrid or any grid that's hypergrid enabled, or even our members of our grid, can drop off Halloween items, be it trees, be it clothing, be it avatars, be it whatever.
Graveyards.
And googly things and houses, and even make a scenery if they like. There's a lot of sceneries, like haunted houses with spooks running around and headless horsemen and all that stuff.
I must say, it's rather funny. When I was at your previous expo, the Steam Expo, I was dying to take a copy, but it wouldn't let me. There was in one of the halls there was like a ready-made scene, which felt like a Halloween scene. Do you remember the one I mean? It was like...
it's a 2x2, so you're going to have to refresh my memory which.
Right. It was... Yeah, it was in one of the halls. It stood out a mile because it had a ground and steps rising up into what looked like...
Oh, that'd be the Mad Scientist building, I think. It was in a dome kind of thing?
Yeah.
Yeah,
and it's it was just sitting there kind of thing, but it felt like a Halloween build in its own right behind the dome. So, but anyway, sorry, that was an aside. So, it's open today for 6 weeks, and basically anybody who's coming along, it's open for contributions and stuff like that.
Well, yeah. Anybody wants to give away things or sell them, because it is a Globit region.
Yeah, but
so so they can buy. If someone's putting something up to buy, then sure, if you got Globits in your account or whatever, and then you can go and buy the object. And there are a few that are giving stuff away. It's a little bit different than last year. That big dome, no. Sam would shoot me where I stand if I gave that away. But no, it's because thanks, Chris. But because the glow bits now they can hypergators can drop their items to be sold because it is glow bit region. So
yeah. Okay, well that
helps a lot.
We'll come back to all things Tangle Grid in a while, but yes, the Globit logo on the sign there that we're showing, I thought made a very good segue, right?
Oh yeah,
into the Globit issue. Now, I'm going to move across to Chris here. It's been a while since you're on the show, so I think we actually have a number of issues that we mentioned in the week to sort of discuss, but maybe a good starting point for you, Chris, is for people who didn't see that on the show or aren't familiar with Globits, just to let them know what Globits is, the way it works and how it stands at the moment. And
Sure.
If Leslie has any comments as a grid owner who uses Globits, then so much better.
Yeah, there's a few I have for Mr. Chris.
Great. Yeah, thank you, Mal. To just bring people up to speed, maybe a year ago is, I think, about January is when we came out of closed beta. We spent about a year building a money module for OpenSim. The money module is what a grid or region owner installs to allow commerce on a sim, on a region or a set of regions. And that's what handles the transactions. And so different service providers provide their own money module. And so that was what we built. We already had a web service to do our own digital currency and to do transactions, and we built a money module for OpenSim. So January, actually, we had a few providers on. One I will mention because it's unfortunate to see them closing down is Zangrid was one of our biggest early partners. Very sad to see her going, instrumental to our growth. And great grid. We're going to miss them there, and we hope everyone who is in the Globit mall regions there is looking to other worlds that are Globit enabled to move their stores.
Let's just say while we're on that, Zangrid is closing, but this is not an example of some disastrous failure in OpenSim or the Hypergrid. They have other reasons where they really have to close, personal reasons, and they've, everybody's going in to get their stuff and maybe move it elsewhere. It's just it's like a slow, sad sort of closing. But it's
I think Suze is moving on to a different stage in her life. I think she said she's going back to study. I think maybe her kids are out of the house.
Yeah.
is what I recall reading.
Always helps.
Anyway, I wanted to mention it because really Suze was an amazing partner, and Zangrid, and as a little farewell, we really appreciated their help. Anyway, we're now up to over 30 worlds that are Globit enabled, that have our money module either across the grid or on some sims. And we are across grid currency. We're not, we're a single currency that is usable anywhere on any region that is Globit enabled. So your balance stays with you. So for instance, Zangrid is closing down. The people who were using Globits and shopping there don't have to worry about, hey, is Suze going to give me a way to cash out? What do I do? Those Globits are all still usable. They're not particular to Zangrid. They're usable, for instance, in TangleGrid. And same thing for the merchants earning them.
Sure.
And so we're still around. But we're up to over 30 worlds. We want to keep growing. I think we're doing about $1,500 a month in transaction volume, probably a few hundred monthly actives. We want to continue to grow those numbers, but that's decent growth for OpenSim for our first year. Some of the keys, you can attach as many avatars on as many worlds as you want to a single Globit account, so you don't need to keep a bunch of balances. You can have one Globit account with your money in it, and you can log in wherever you want. You can, authorize that grid, that region, to have access to your account, and your balance shows up. And you can use all of the in-world UI elements to make purchases, buy an object, pay a user, pay a scripted object, things like that. We work very hard to make all of those work.
Do you know one of the most infuriating things I find on some Hypergrid locations is I click on buy, and it says, buy for 0, yeah? And then I click buy again on the buy box, and it says you don't have enough lindens. I think if they just copy some code from Linden Lab that pops up the second life box. But I presume if you have a Globits account and you're in a Globits region, things like your Podex balance will disappear and you'll see your Globits balance in the viewer. Is that how it works?
Yeah, and some of what I'll talk about today, the kind of two contributions I've made to the viewer and to the server, speak toward that. So when you're in a Globit region, your Globit balance will show up, but traditionally for anyone hypergridding around, ignore Globit. You go from DigiWorld grid, which has D dollars, and you hypergrid to some new other grid, let's say ZanGrid, and you're in one of their local regions with which should be Z dollars. You would still see D dollars from DigiWorld's grid. The way the viewer and server have traditionally been set up is, was old school, was thinking when you log in, we set all of these things and they're static. And so, yes, your balance would update, but there would be a number of things in the viewer which wouldn't update. And would be a little bit confusing for shoppers. So Globit has provided a system where, for instance, you can go to TangleGrid and you can shop, and then you can hypergrid to someplace else that is Globit enabled, like say Great Canadian Grid. Go to one of their mall regions and and spend more Globits there. You can earn Globits as a merchant on one of the grids that's enabled and spend them elsewhere. But the UI hasn't been perfect, and those are limitations of the server and viewer that are outside the realm of the money module that we had been focused on before. Yeah. So anyway, does that give you guys a pretty good, idea of what Globit does? Am I missing any major points?
Well, actually, first point to come up actually on that, and I may have got this wrong, but I understood that Globits was not only compatible with hypergrid regions, but possibly even other platforms where you would have a pool. I don't know, Fidelity, Sciencebase, or have I got that wrong? Am I thinking of something else, or
we absolutely are. So we built, a web service with web APIs. The money module for OpenSim converts OpenSim function calls to web RESTful HTTP calls to hit our service. So we're absolutely compatible with, frankly, anything that is connected to the internet. What it requires is building, like we built the money module for OpenSim, we need to build a money module for those platforms, which converts the events that their purchasing UI sends to a web call to our service. But we have built, the platform we built is not specific to OpenSim. So that is our goal, is that, we're positioning ourselves. Our goal is to be the PayPal of VR in some sense. We want to be across all of VR. And, our focus are, immersive user-to-user microtransactions that are fast, inexpensive, and easy to use. And, PayPal, does a few things. I say we're the PayPal, and why are we different? Why are we not PayPal? They really don't handle microtransactions. They're rather expensive for payment processing when you're talking small value, and you need to go to the web every time to push a payment through. So the other thing for anyone using Globit, they know this, but you come to our website once to authorize. So you go to TangleGrid, they have an app on our website, and you'll get a message that says, authorize TangleGrid and link this avatar to your Globit account. So if you click on that and you launch in the browser, you come to our website once. You do have to come there, and you'll get a little authorization dialog, not unlike you'd get from Facebook or other sites to authorize an app. And they'll say, hey, do you want to authorize TangleGrid to have access to your balance and to request transactions on your behalf? And you hit approve. Yeah. At that point, we link that avatar. By the way, you can do this with a bunch of other avatars in TangleGrid. If you have more avatars, you can link them to the same Globit account. Yeah. But we create a link on our back end. And now TangleGrid, when you go to buy something, says, hey, this avatar is looking to purchase X object from some other avatar for this amount of money. We make sure we've got an authorization and we process that. What that means is, unlike PayPal, where you have to come to the website every time and push the payment through, once you've authorized with us once, you get to stay in World as long as you've got money there, and you can walk around and you can go buy this, pay this person, and you don't have to leave. You only have to come back to us to purchase more Globits. And we believe that is very necessary across all of VR, especially as you're talking about platforms, VR and AR, that are going to be goggle-based, where you're not sitting at a computer with a keyboard. You don't want to be going to a website every 20 seconds.
Yeah. No, when we were talking, I did think, in my mind, the parallels, something like PayPal is, transaction fees can be a major problem with them, and delays for that matter. Although it's, they're 20 years old, it's a renowned service. People, I didn't even have a PayPal account about 2 years ago because I'd never really gone in for this, trusting one's details to the web. But, it's, it's like a high street bank now. I mean, it doesn't appear to be going anywhere, and there's a risk involved in everything. But as you say, this is VR virtual space orientated, so it can do microtransactions. And, we all know, for example, that I can't go into Sciencebase and purchase something from a store there and bring it back into OpenSim. It just doesn't work that way. But on the other hand, if I have an account somewhere that I can freely jump between places, maybe even different viewers to go to places, I can access the same account to engage in those kind of microtransactions. Like I like the, I've got a mesh avatar now. I don't use it on this show because its lips are a bit stuck, but it's the same in Sciencebase, High Fidelity, and here. Right.
Yep.
But the clothes it wears and everything else like that are all attached to the mesh, so it always is the same. But it might be that I had a similar avatar and I wanted to buy, identical clothes on different platforms. I couldn't move the clothes between the platforms, but I want to buy them. And since every instance of my avatar is me, that's just convenient. And for example, here, we run this show on my own, I call it private grid. I have to invite people in via the hypergrid. For production purposes, it's faster and everything better. But my main avatar, as most people know me, on the Great Canadian Grid. So presumably, when Outworlds updates itself, I can have Podex here. It not anybody, maybe a donation box, but it would be no use to a non-commercial one resident grid like this. But on the other hand, my Canadian avatar could share that Podex account, and so whichever avatar I was using could be using the same purse, basically.
I think you mean Globits, right?
I mean purse with Globits in it.
Yeah, but you said Podex.
Did I?
Yes.
No.
He did, didn't he?
I think I said products, not Podex.
It must be your accent.
Sorry about that. Maybe I slipped. We're not getting younger. Right.
Speak for yourself.
I was speaking for myself. Thank you. Right. Yeah. So that.
I don't know. The voice is going in and out.
Oh. Are we losing voice?
He's probably experiencing bandwidth problems at the moment because he's jiggling.
Yeah, you and Leslie are good.
Jiggling.
Okay.
Hello?
Can you hear us, Chris? Because I think your bandwidth is dropping.
Let me plug in.
There you go.
Come
back. You're back now.
I can hear you. Give me.
See, he's losing again.
Yeah, I'm getting what sign?
Give me 1 minute. Let me try to fix something.
Okay, yeah.
I'm going to try to fix something quick.
We were getting a bit of a slowdown there. Okay, let's, while Chris is trying to sort that one out, let's move back to you, Leslie. While we're on the topic, I mean, how long has Tangle Grid been supporting Podex? And is it kind of Globits, sorry. I'm really getting in a mess here.
Get a sign, James. Get a sign.
That time I did goof. Right. Globits, I am sorry. How long has Tangle Grid been?
We've been active now for about 4 or 5 months, something like that.
Right. And can you tell amongst your residents and visitors how kind of popular it is? Do people gravitate towards that when they know it's available, or do they tend to stick with local currencies quite a lot, or are there any tangible sort of figures?
Well, a lot of our shops. We have another region beside the expo, and it's called Globitville, and it has free shops for people to put their stuff. That it's also Globits enabled, and most of our residents have put shop there plus Entangle. So they have both. So if they want to sell goods for Globits, they got identical objects or store in Globitville. So they do get the hypergators to be able to buy their stuff.
Okay.
So we kind of give them the two options. T was thinking about doing a conversion where it goes from T-Bucks to Globits and vice versa through an ATM, but we were working on that part. That's probably something I will discuss with Chris later on in email or something like that. But yeah, he just poofed, poor bug.
Yes. Oh yeah, we can hear you, Chris, but we can't see you.
Oh.
Swings and roundabouts.
Do you want me to log out and log back in?
Oh, if you are okay. It looks like you logged out already. But if you haven't, that is probably the best idea. A fresh login.
What I did is I plugged in an Ethernet cable because I foolishly not before we started and was running on Wi-Fi. And sorry about that. I wasn't even thinking about it when we were setting up. And I think while Skype recovers from that properly, OpenSim does not.
Okay. Well, I would suggest you just check your logged out and then relog. And I will teleport you over here if you didn't take a landmark. So that'll be no problem. And we'll see you in a minute, I guess.
Great.
That actually, Leslie, sounds to me that's ideal. I mean, actually, I think Canada does a thing here. You know, they have different commercial regions that either use, in Canada's case, Fodex or the Globits enabled regions, and it would make sense for shops to have a branch, as it were, in both regions.
Yeah, it is, because you're selling locally, which is fine too, but some people are not hypergators, or some people just want the item now, or I don't know, not necessarily now, but they're in Tangle Grid, they're a Tangle resident, they don't have the hassle. It's not really a hassle, but they don't have accounts with Globits. So
yeah,
then you have on the other coin, you have the hypergators, or a few of the, like me, Gary, and T, we all have Globit accounts. Most of it was for testing and stuff, because I'm not much of a hypergator myself, but we have that option. So the only thing that, when Chris gets back, I got a few questions for him about that. Maybe he can answer it on the show. But I find having the dual currencies, so it covers everybody, because in hypergating, and because Tangle is a semi-closed grid, which means you can't just come in and where it says take a copy and all that stuff, you can't do that in Tangle Grid. You can hypergate there, you can look at things, but you can't take it or whatever. The only way you can is if you put a giver script, and then a giver script will give the item in the box. So having the Globitville is really good in that case, because then anybody who really wants to give stuff away or sell it or anything to hypergators, it gives them that option. Whereas Tangle is like, because it's semi-closed, you can't do that. That's why we put Expo on a Globit setup, because there were people saying, yeah, but I can't get this item, or I want to buy that, where do I buy it? We've always said that people can put their items out, but you have to put a giver script in it to give away. But what if you want someone to sell it? Yeah. I said, okay, me and T and Gary decided, we'll make Expo Globit, we'll make Globitville next door with the shops. That way, the hypergator comes to the expo, they can also walk over and see Globitville. Sure.
Which makes perfect sense. I mean, not to mention that dreaded P word, well, will Podex again. It always, it always annoys me to some extent that I have some P's or whatever they're called in Great Canada Grid, and yet if I hypergrid over to DigiWorlds, which also use P's, they don't work. You know,
No.
it's called the same currency, but it each instance of it on each grid is completely separate. So I can't spend my P's in DigiWorlds, basically.
Well, see, that's why we investigated Vervox. I think it's called Vervox, the first multi-grid currency.
Yeah.
4 days waiting before you get your money in. Forget that. We've also investigated Podox. Didn't like the fact that you couldn't transfer from one grid to the other, like you were just saying.
Yeah.
Plus, there was a bunch of, they wanted private information that I didn't think necessary for them to have. You know, to me, I didn't like that. They were digging too deep into my real life, personal life for information they didn't need to have.
Fair
you
enough.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Whereas Globits, all they asked was, you know, can you send, like PayPal did, send us 50 cents so we can verify that you do have a PayPal account or whatever the case may be. And that was it. Well, and my avatar name and, you know, being the registered person of the Globits account. But now that we got Mr. Chris, are you back?
Yep.
Yes, indeed. On hardwired at last.
That's right.
I'm glad she managed to sit down again properly. I was a bit worried for a minute. You have to click on the cushion. That's the trick.
But maybe I can ask Chris a couple of quick questions.
Yes, let's lead.
Okay, Chris. When you say anybody, I know the answer, but maybe our viewers would like to know the answer. When you say you can hook Globits up to any region or any grid, does that include closed grids, for example? Like, say they're not using them to really as a money module, because OpenSim, the original money module, we had to use the one that we kind of digged out of the box, if you will, and it's a real pain in the butt to set up, but we have it set up. That's why we also use PayPal mostly for our transactions, because OpenSim did not supply a money module per se. Can it be used, as long as you have the files that you need to download to set this thing up, can it be used on a closed grid as a primary currency instead of having a secondary currency kind of thing?
Yeah, and I don't know if we have. I'd have to take a look. We might have some closed grids that do it. You don't have to have your grid open to hypergrid. You can use us as your currency on your grid, across your grid, and it can be completely closed, where you don't accept hypergrid visitors and you don't let your users use you as an ID provider to hypergrid elsewhere. And you'll go through the same process any open grid would, where when a user wants to buy, they'll go to the Globit website. They'll authorize the app that's associated with your grid, and then their balance will show up and they can spend. You know, the difference there from, say, using a Podex-based currency, I guess, for your closed grid is you won't control the money supply, you know, which probably makes things simpler. But you know, since it's still a currency for us that is across everything, we don't give, say, a closed grid owner the ability to just mint currency, which I think with Podex you might be able to do. Users can still, your merchants can still sell Globits, you know, through our site like any other merchants can, and make profit, or they can take those Globits to other grids via other avatars and shop with them.
Chris, if I can just quickly intervene, James is back channeling me, asking me to ask you to switch your lips on.
Turn your talk button on.
So it looks like my lips are constantly moving, even when I'm not talking.
Oh, that's odd, and I don't see him moving at all, but it's James that counts.
I don't see him either. But...
It's very odd. I think probably when you log back in, you just needed to set it again. Okay. So I don't know. You know, you can. Some people, you know, we can pretend to be ventriloquists. In other words, if you can't get your lips moving, it's compulsory to bring a puppet. You've got to bring a puppet whose lips do move.
Well, I mean, grow your mustache really long over your lips so they really can't see.
I like
this
that.
will help. Or indeed, wear a mesh avatar where those lips just won't budge. Yeah.
If I mention one more thing too quickly, which is, you know, we get ask questions about, the inventory issues and can I take a product home? And what I should say is, Globit has made a choice that we're not trying to solve the IP or the inventory issues. We are solving the commerce issues. So people have asked, well, can I take my products home or are they stuck on the grid? Those are grid settings. We don't mess at all. So Tangle Grid might be able to speak to this because they said they've got some areas that are a semi-closed grid. The grid defines whether or not a hypergrid visitor that buys things has access to those when they leave that grid. And so you can have a Globit-enabled region somewhere where things purchased are only usable on that grid, and you can have a Globit-enabled region somewhere where someone who teleports in and buys things can take them with them. And that's outside of our hands. We don't modify any of that. So I think most Globit-enabled malls have set them up so people can take things home with them. But
exactly. Yeah. That's why Expo and Globitville is fully open to OpenSim, whereas the rest of the grid is semi-closed. So if you want to take it home with you, you can only buy at Globitville or Expo. That's the only way they can get them out. So
that actually makes perfect sense. Although I must say if, for example, I come to Tangle and try to buy something, it is very explicit that I don't have any Tangle currency. And, also, I look for things going in my suitcase when I buy them, which confirms they're exportable. But as you say, if Chris's Globits is independent of that, which I think is right, because it's a purse, isn't it? It's a money module. I would sincerely hope that vendors make it quite clear when you're paying with Podex whether you have export permissions or whether it's purchasing for that grid only. I think that's something the vendors will have to come up with to alert people. It's a trust issue. People aren't going to want to buy a product from a vendor when they might find that they're paying Globits and it doesn't come back into their suitcase.
Yeah, it might be something for Globits though, if it isn't already there. I never checked to put that important note. We are not responsible for the grid's way of setting up the region. In order for things to be transferred, it has to be so and so and so. But please contact your grid owner for more information. Blah blah blah.
We haven't run into complaints yet, or people asking for refunds for that, or disputing transactions. So I'm guessing that most grids have done a very good job of making it clear, or setting it up so that they are exportable. So I would say for us, if we start to run into those issues, we'll look to work with grid owners for how do we make this obvious. But I'm guessing just by the fact that we haven't had customer complaints that the grid owners have done a good job so far.
Or they figured it out and let
I would add at this point, by the way, I didn't do it at the beginning because I know a lot of you get IMs when we go on air and may miss the actual beginning of the show. So if for those of you who are watching live, at YouTube or YouTube Gaming, you will notice there is a box there somewhere where you can actually ask questions and communicate with us. I'm always forgetting to mention that, but if you have any questions for Chris in particular, but also Leslie, or me for that matter, you can put them in there. And I'll quickly ask James, has there been any activity of that sort of its own accord?
Not anything yet, so I'm keeping an eye on it. And I haven't seen any much of activity. So, but I do watch it. Yep.
Yeah. It's up to me to remind people they can do that, basically. Right. I will come into it actually in a minute because, as you know, Chris, I had a chat beforehand, and there was some sort of vaguely contentious issues that were coming up, and I said, "Is it okay? We, address these directly." And I know that you have been monitoring these things, and without naming names, will wish to comment on some, claims and false truths and all the rest of it, whatever is going on. One thing I would mention first, actually, is that I gather from Ferd Fredericks, who does the Outworlds installs, of which this region here is one of them, that when the update for that comes out, the Globits module will be as good as built in. to Outworld's installs. And it occurs to me that, you've got a private region where you're the only resident, for example. Globits here would be, apart from maybe a donation box for hypergrid visitors, would be pretty useless. But, it's kind of your base avatar, and it's worth having. So if as Leslie decided, if this is well, it's on the hypergrid, but let's say it wasn't and was actually a closed grid, it might be a lot of schools have this. They have OpenSIM installations which aren't hypergrid enabled for the greater hypergrid, but are on a kind of private educational hypergrid. So pupils, can move between the classroom in one region and a classroom in another region, not necessarily on the same grid. They might have a school grid. And, well, if they're kids and, where they have, well, most kids, I think, have bank accounts of some sort anyway. The idea that they could have a Globis account and sort of, spend it within the closed grids that are part of the educational, network. I imagine that will possibly be quite attractive too, even though commerce is hardly the focal point of education.
Yeah, but they could go and play video games at an arcade if they have one on the grid.
Yeah.
Put in a Globit and play for 15 minutes.
We're definitely excited because, we've tried to make it so that Globit is easy to set up. And I think a lot of people using Outworlds are looking for that, simple setup. So I think it will be appealing for those that want currency. And Fred wanted to do this maybe last year or earlier in the year and ran into some issues. It wasn't until a couple months ago that I dug into, he runs the Diva distribution is what is underlying his installer.
Right.
And I had to walk through their code, but we finally figured out how they modify and store things differently in the config files and wrote a set of instructions for configuring Globit, adding it to a Diva distribution. So we have those instructions on our website. Anyone running Diva that isn't running Outworlds or is and doesn't want to wait is welcome to reach out. But we sent that over to Fred. Now that he's got that and he's doing a new installer probably for the 0.9.0, I don't think he'll run into any issues. And I think, what he'll do is give people a nice UI so you don't have to modify, walk through our config instructions where you modify config files.
He's very good at that. This region wouldn't even exist if it wasn't from his little control panel. Because he asked me to go into that code, forget it. Right. It's what's I going to say here? I've lost my thread there. Okay, I'll probably come back to it when I remember what it was. It was another sort of generalism, but for some reason I've lost track of what I was going to say. We were talking yesterday, Chris, about I think we all know that there are people out there in forums, in the comments of blogs on websites and stuff like that, who are probably a minority, but they got very loud voices, and they can, in some cases, even though they're a tiny minority, make allegations, that aren't strictly speaking, well researched or accurate or stuff. And I'm not talking about the White House here. I'm talking about.
This is exactly why I like you giving me this platform to speak about it, though, right? Is because that's what happens when you don't dispute those.
Exactly. So I think actually, without mentioning names, because we've agreed that would be a very bad idea, not to get into libel, slander, or anything else. I know that certain people out there have raised issues, if issues is the right word, that have kind of slightly upset you, disturbed you, or maybe you just feel that need to be cleared up. And really, I thought, we can give you an opportunity to do that in a black and white way, shall we say.
That's right.
Yeah,
I appreciate it. And I'll look at it from the positive perspective, which is some of the things did bother me, and part of it was just some of it's my own personal time I put into making open source contributions and to try to do it well and do it in a way that actually doesn't just favor Globit, is good for everyone, that any money module can use, and have folks throw out, hey, we shouldn't adopt this because it's just good for Globit, and see false things. And it's for anyone that's ever worked on something hard and seen someone, make a negative statement, it's hard enough if it might be accurate and it's a criticism, and that's useful and helpful. But when it's false, it's emotionally challenging. So, but what I will look at from the positive perspective is, hey, there might be some other folks who have these misconceptions. And so it's a teachable moment to talk to people and clear up what I've done and to learn a bit about how OpenSim works. So the larger piece that I want to talk about is a viewer patch that I made. And one of the pieces that I'll discuss in there is also a previous modification that happened to the OpenSim core around land pass sales. So recently, to bring everyone up to speed, I submitted a patch to, which, by the way, this I wrote in my personal time, not as Globit, but a patch to fix the bugs in hypergrid teleporting and having multiple currencies on a grid with what currency symbol shows up with the buy currency and the buy land flows. Right. We'll get into some of the details of those, but quick summary for what you would see as a user right now in OpenSim without that patch on pretty much any viewer is you hypergrid teleport to a different grid, or you cross a region boundary to a region that's running a different currency service, and the currency symbol won't update at the top of your viewer. It will still say buy whatever the old currency was. You open up the buy currency floater, you'll see the wrong currency symbol. The helper URI would not update. So if you tried to buy land, it would try to run through the API set up by the previous region or grid that you were on. If you try to buy currency, same thing. That's one of the reasons why if you've ever been on, say, OS grid and you teleport to another grid and you don't have enough funds and the buy currency or insufficient funds flow pops up, you might be like, why did I just see a message from OS grid? I'm not on OS grid anymore. You saw that because the viewer did not update to the new grids, helper URI. So we were trying to fix those just to make it a better experience. And part of it is for Globit. We have rather complex setup instructions for folks that want to make buying the buy currency flow a little bit more helpful, or the buy land flow work, because traditionally you had to set up an XML RPC server somewhere. You had to set up 2 PHP files to receive those calls. And it's rather complex to do. And then you need to get all of your users to update their viewer. So my goal was to say, hey, if when someone's on a Globit-enabled region, I can get the viewer to send us those calls. And for anyone else that wants to update their money module, the same thing. We can make it so that OpenSim grids don't have to set up an XML RPC server, don't have to set that URL, don't have to ask users to update it, so that as you hypergrid around, you actually hit the right services. And then further for Globit, we've had some people who have asked us to not message users when they show up at the start of a session to ask them to buy Globits or to authorize their account. And I've always told them the problem is I can't tie in to the purchase flow, the insufficient funds flow, because that goes through that helper URI. So now that we've done this, once enough of the viewers adopt this code, we might actually be able to remove that in messaging, which some people feel is spammy, and save it for when someone tries to buy an item and they don't have enough Globits or aren't authorized yet, and we can present it then, because we can actually capture that flow now. So it was, and as I said, this is, I think, an improvement for any money module that wants to take advantage of it. It's an improvement for any grid that is open to hypergridding, regardless of whether they run any money module at all, or which one they use. Spent a while doing that. It does look like Firestorm is going to put it in. I don't have final word on that, but I haven't seen any complaints about it. Cinder Biscuits mentioned that she was working it into Singularity and into Alchemy. So it should end up in those. I think those are the 3 most popular viewers that I'm aware of.
I think they are, actually, yeah.
Pretty much.
So anyway.
Kukua is working on updating theirs too, so you may want to contact them as well.
So, and I don't know whether it's relevant, Krista Lopez view on Local, which is based on Singularity anyway. That could, she probably maybe integrate it.
Great.
It's funny. I've got a little anecdote before we continue. This is just one of those great coincidences, as James will tell you. Before we came on with the show, we were recording the news, and just shortly before that, I was telling James I'd just TP back to this grid, right, which doesn't even have a currency. It's my private grid, and I actually. Yeah, I think. Well, I got a message that I didn't have enough funds for something. I thought, what kind of rubbish is this? And I'm on my own grid with no currency. Yeah, and I had to relog, and it sorted itself out. But I just didn't know where that message had come from. I had been on, I think, Greek Life Grid, which actually preparing for the show, oddly enough, and I think it's almost as if I came back. And their currency system was still operating on my grid. And I thought, whoa.
And parts of it might have been, because the parts that run through that helper URI don't go through the standard money module flow. What that is there's a helper URI that is supplied with the grid info. And when someone adds a grid, that is set. When you log in from the viewer right now, your viewer grabs that from the grid info that it pulled the very first time you added the grid, and by land, insufficient funds, and by currency flows send calls to that URL. They don't send it to the SIM that you're connected to the region you're on.
Right.
And so, if you logged into that, or sometimes that's not stored until there are certain actions where it's not stored until the first time you request it. But you could teleport back to your own grid, and you could still be sending calls to the grid you were previously on. So anyway,
is your helper URL even installed on this grid?
Probably not.
Probably not. That's probably why you're getting the message too, because you need that for it to call, like he says.
Yeah. So. We want to make it so that people don't have to worry about that. It's a bunch of extra steps that we get mixed reporting from people. This worked for me. This didn't work for me. Like I said, one big challenge is a grid that's up and running and then decides, hey, we want to make land sales work, or we want to do X. Great, we'll follow your instructions. And I'm like, great, now that you're done and you've set up your helper URI and you've added it, now tell every user that's ever added your grid info to go into the viewer preferences and refresh it, because it doesn't request it every time you log in. It only requests it when you add the grid. And I can tell you with Firestorm, I have found out the hard way in trying to test these things that you actually have to deselect the grid that you want to refresh. So you need to select a different grid. Then you need to go to your preferences, go to the grids, refresh the grid info, then come back, out of the preferences menu, reselect the grid that you want to log into that will now have an updated helper URI. If you are on, for instance,
and you wonder why SL people have so much trouble adding grids. Hello.
So I've discovered this through some pretty hard testing, and that's the thing. Even like things like that just mean that this stuff just doesn't work consistently. So if instead I can make it so that when you cross to a Globit region, and like I said, any other money module is welcome to send this info. I'll talk about the misconceptions in a minute. And how it actually works. But we send a helper URI. Our patch basically has the viewer store that as an override, and while you're on that region, use that URI. And that URI for Globit is simply set to the SIM, that the URL of the SIM that region is on, so that call comes in. We can register for that HTTP call, that XML RPC call rather, there, and capture it and handle it directly from our module. And then that means it doesn't matter whether the grid owner set up the URL properly or put the right port on the URL. It doesn't matter whether the user updated their grid info or, recently, if it's ever been changed. None of that matters, because we actually send it directly, and, and we've got it in the code to do it properly, and we handle it. So now we can guarantee that works right and consistently for users.
So basically it forces it when you cross into a Globit's region, then it forces to change the helper.
Yeah, we can provide like if grid owners tell me, hey, I don't want that to happen for some reason, we could provide an override in our config to not send that information to the viewer. So we can give grid owners the ability to prevent that from happening if they want to. I'm going to wait till it gets adopted by viewers and I hear back from grid owners. Yeah.
I have just been reminded of the question that I can remember before we moved into this strand, and actually it might be relevant. The other thing about Globits, which I think makes it somewhat unique, is that it can be implemented grid-wide by a grid owner, or it can simply be implemented by region owners on a grid that may not have implemented it grid-wide, if you see what I mean. Are there any subtle differences between that? For example, if you somebody who doesn't want Globits but is on a grid that has implemented it grid-wide, do they just bypass it and use another currency, or is it better for region owners to do it or grid owners to do it, or both?
I think it's more of a security issue. So who controls the code? So if you're creating an app and you're enabling it, you're basically saying, I'm taking responsibility that malicious code is not running, that I'm not going to request a transaction on behalf of someone who is authorized that isn't one that they requested. So in the case of OS Grid, they should not enable it grid-wide because they let a bunch of people connect servers with code that they have no idea what's running. So the right way on OS Grid, if someone wants Globit, is to say, hey, I'm going to bring up 4 or 6 regions that I control. I will create my own app for my set of regions, and I will enable it there, and I will connect to OS Grid. And when a user comes in, even if they've authorized at 3 or 4 other places in OS Grid, they'll need to authorize me as a separate app. And that makes sense because really who they're trusting is me, that my regions on OS Grid are not malicious, okay? Or they're not authorizing if they're not sure. Now you talk about a grid like Tangle Grid, which is, which they control all of the servers, that I would say makes sense for the grid owner to do. And then they can offer to regions within the space, hey, do you, if they rent out whole regions, and I don't know if Tangle does this or not, Zangrid did this, they can offer to them, hey, do you want me to enable this on your region or not? I'll enable whichever money module you want.
Yeah, I was just going to say that you can't have both, but you can have one. And how it is, we do control whether they have Globits or not as a grid. We're not a hookup grid, so if they want Globits, they have to request it, and we turn it on that region. We have another girl who has a 2x2. It's Globits because she wanted a Globit mall, so we had to turn it on. She doesn't.
Right.
Yeah. And so I would say it really comes down to who controls the code on that SIM, and in terms of whose app should be there. And so in most cases, it is the grid owner. In Zangrid, she had Z-dollars, she had, I think, a Podex currency, and she had Globits. And initially, we were just on the Globit Mall regions, and that was successful. People started requesting to have Globit on their region. And she said, let me know, and I'll enable it, and I'll add you to the list of, we got up to maybe 20 plus regions very quickly across Zangrid that were all effectively owned by different people or managed by different people. They were all under the Zangrid account. Now, what was nice about that was you come in, you authorize Zangrid in any of those regions or the mall, and you're authorized when you walk into any of them. Your balance would show up, you spend, so you only had to do it once. Whereas, like I said, in an OS Grid environment, for security purposes, you should be authorizing each of those separately. Because, as I said, OS Grid doesn't know what code someone is really running on their SIMs.
Right.
Yeah. And, to get back to some of the misconceptions here. So we released this, modification. Really, I released this. By the way, this didn't come right just out of my head, as some people thought. Way back when we were building the system and we talked about these things, Cinder, months ago, mentioned that tying in this way was the way she would recommend we tie in and update the viewer. And we, from the Globit side, started adding to a map called OpenSim Extras. It's information that is sent down already, a dictionary that goes down to the viewer whenever you cross a region boundary in OpenSim. Okay, so this information already set. We're just adding 2 values to it, the currency symbol and the helper URI. That didn't really do anything outside of maybe Singularity, because Cinder may have, I think she was consuming the currency symbol there. And so what we did was now finally have time that I modified Firestorm to read those, to parse those, and actually modify the values in the viewer. So it's not doing a heck of a lot of work. There's nothing that should cause, any lag or any delays. We're not doing any new communication. We're not doing anything that will break any other money modules. If that information is not sent by a money module, it just doesn't override the grid currency. It continues to use whatever the grid-wide setting was. So we're not breaking anything. There's nothing that's not backwards compatible. There's nothing that will hinder another money module. There's nothing to prevent another money module that wants to take the effort to quickly add that to the OpenSim extras map to take advantage of the code that we've provided. There's no extra call from the viewer to the server to request things or query databases. This is information that our module has stored on the server. When that event is fired off on the server side that basically says, hey, build this map to send down, our module is capturing that event, adding 2 values to it. Everything else is already there in OpenSim. That map, that dictionary is sent down to the viewer parses it. From the viewer side, it's parsing 2 additional values. It's effectively storing those values. There are some UI adjustments. I don't expect any of those will cause any delays. Most of those don't happen until after the region is fully loaded, so it really shouldn't affect region crossing lag at all. But those are some of the accusations I've seen. And that I guess was part of what bugs me is, if I had a server dev or a viewer dev saying, hey, I think you should have done this another way, or someone saying, hey, will this affect server lag? Hey, does this make extra database calls? Or, hey, I assume X. Part of what bothered me was people making statements that were not assumptions and were not questions. They were stated as fact, and they were stated very boldly. The way that other people, if they read them, will assume the amount of confidence this person has in these statements makes me assume that this person knows what they're talking about. And from my perspective, I looked at it and I said, the only way someone could assume this is if they are not an engineer, they do not write code, they have never looked at the communication between the server and the viewer, they have never dug into how the viewer works or how the server works. So it's troubling for me to see people without a software background and who have not dug into the server or the viewer jump onto forums and make statements about how something works or what it does, not in a, hey, does this do it, but a, this is horrible, it does X.
Yeah.
And then you get a bunch of people who read that and go, hey, this is stated very boldly. Maybe it's true. And now I need to get onto a text chat. And like I said, hey, it's great to be able to answer those, but I'd rather you ask us questions. And I'd rather that once I correct that, if you realize that I have that experience, by the way, I have a CS degree from Harvard University. I've written a game engine. I was at Second Life for 5 years. I've written a money module for OpenSim. I've now gone through the viewer code and written a patch there. I've got a lot of experience here. I've got a lot of experience with large systems. That doesn't mean I'm always right, but give me, a little bit of leeway that if you don't have any of that,
yes, exactly,
you should accept what I've said. And instead, I don't get apologies, and I don't get, oh, thanks for correcting. I just get, for the most part, more accusations, thrown. I will admit there is someone in the forums, and I appreciate it, brought some things to my attention that I wasn't aware were out there, and also brought to my attention where those came about, which was, I think, at the dev meeting that I haven't been attending that's on Tuesdays. And so I want to thank that person. I might not agree with all the statements, but there were some positive things that came out of that, which are, hey, okay, some of these misconceptions are coming out of the weekly dev meeting. I need to be at that when I can be to talk to those developers and the people who aren't developers that show up to listen and clarify some things. And so that is another audience that I'll hopefully be at on Tuesday to say, hey, I heard X misconceptions may have come out of this meeting. I'm happy to answer questions. Let me explain how this works. And those should be mostly developers. So I can talk at a much deeper level there.
Actually, well, as a sideline here, on the news program separately, James here often gives he gives a weekly report, if some short or long, depending on what the devs have been talking about during the week. James, is have the money modules and this sort of thing been coming across the radar? Not last Tuesday necessarily, but of recent months.
It hasn't really been a big topic. I mean, it hasn't, bubbled up in those meetings. I think those meetings are, they're open office hours for, some people are developers, some people are grid owners, some people are users that are, I mean, pretty much, I'm a fan of OpenSim. I'm not really a developer. I'm not a grid owner. And so the real developer conversation, I believe, still happens in the chat, the
IRC.
The IRC chat, right? Yeah. Right. And so
I would love.
Yeah.
Go on.
Yeah.
I'd love to use that as a
Chris.
segue.
Yeah.
Because one of the things that came up was someone said, "Hey, this patch for the viewer, by the way, patch for the viewer, not for the server, creates backwards incompatibilities that have broken other money modules." And I said there were, changes in 0.9.1 dev. And I said there are no changes. This is a viewer patch. There are no changes to OpenSim core that breaks anything. This is, a viewer patch. And someone said, well, what about this commit that's a breaking change and broke my OMC money module? And I said, okay, that has nothing to do with this patch. That had to do with core adding a money module interface to do LAN pass sales. And he said, yes, and Globit was the one who asked for this because they made all this news about implementing LAN pass sales. And I said, oh my goodness, I can't believe I'm getting accused of this. So what's interesting is had any of those people been in IRC, they could have worked with me when I was begging core not to make those changes. And I had a couple of folks that run hosting provider companies in there with me trying to do the same thing. And the core devs basically refusing to listen. They're not always huge fans of commerce systems. But what was interesting is I was being accused of requesting changes that in IRC, there were records of it. I was begging them not to make because I told them this is going to break other money modules. I said, I'll go patch mine, but you're creating a breaking change that you don't need to create. I sent other suggestions and I said, you could do it this way and it won't break the interface. You don't need to do anything. Ultimately, what happened, to give people the background, is I had some customers that asked me to implement land pass sales. It was a transaction I didn't know existed. But if you go into a parcel, you can set the access to a parcel that you control to be available to people that buy a pass in the UI. You set the amount of time and the price, and then a user will see, currency ban lines. And if they, I believe, right-click on it, they can buy a pass, and they'll get a little window that says, do you want to buy a pass for this many hours for this much currency? And if they click yes, they get access for that long.
I didn't know that.
So I asked Core about it, and they didn't want to implement it. And I said, okay. And so I went off, and I started to implement it. As I did, part of that process that's really hard is going into the viewer and trying to figure out where does this information come from? What event does it call on the server? What information does it pass? What of these toggles, what value do they show up as in the information that comes through an event? So I figured that out. I figured out what event I had to capture in the money module and what information someone selected in the viewer corresponded to what data that came through. As I did that, I posted it to the IRC dev channel because I'm someone who likes to share information. I'm a teacher at heart. It's great for people. I shouldn't be the only one with that. I did the research. The way I get more value is, hey, everyone, here's this. Since I still have not been given access to the opensim.org wiki where I can write it, at least I could share it on the dev channel. When I finished this and said it was finished and I was ready to deploy, the core team suddenly decided it was a priority to do this in core because they did not feel and did not want a money module to implement it. And I would say it's misguided logic. I'm going to put a little of my own perception here. If you feel I'm wrong, anyone does that's listening, that is fine. Anytime you're trying to claim you know why someone else did something. I
want to interrupt just a sec to try and come up with something I think might make it clearer to viewers what we're talking about here.
Oh, sure.
I am running a music venue, right, on the grid, right? Now, anybody who goes to see musicians on OpenSync grids or the obvious metaphor in Second Life, for example, we all know that these troubadours, wander around the grid with tip jars, and it's like putting money into their hat on the street. But rather than that, there have been experiments where people actually charge an entrance fee for a gig. And an entrance fee usually means, you know, you maybe do it on the web or something. They put you, when you've paid, they put you on a special access list and stuff like that. It's not been, so it's been awkward to implement. Now, I didn't know about this land pass thing, but the moment you mentioned it just now, Chris, I suddenly thought, well, this is an obvious thing, isn't it? I go to a region, right, and the region's available to rent, and I can book that region for, say, 3 hours, and I can pay to have that region for 3 hours, and also the people coming to the concert I'm going to be putting there can pay to me to come into the concert, and then of course after that I pay the performer or whatever. It's more like that real life metaphor, and it sounds to me like this, you know, it's like being able to control the missions, right? At the end of the day, they're going to have to use some sort of money module to pay those, aren't they? So presumably if I'm holding, you know, Superstar X gig on such and such region that I'm getting a pass to, you know, 3 hours booking kind of thing, presumably I'm going to have to choose which currency people pay for tickets in or pay entry in.
Yeah.
And so isn't it just like any of the other systems? I mean, I may choose to a grid and tell them they've all got to pay in Podex because and pay with money on that grid, or they can come and pay with Globis and come in from anywhere. It seems to me a very natural way of doing things, that if, you know, if people are going to have paying concerts, they should dip into their Globit pocket and wallet and pay. And that way they're open to hyper-good travelers and everything. But so I'm not quite sure, as a layman here, just exactly where that distinction between what Core implements and what the module implements is.
So this was part of the problem is, that sounds natural, and you might think I've got a money module, this is just going to work. What you should be aware of is that when you click buy on an object, or you click, you know, to pay a user and you pay a user, or you click to pay an object and you pay an object, or you have a scripted object that pays you. Those all come through different events with different information. So that's not one flow that hits the money module and says with a, hey, move money from user A to user B. Those are all events which the money module captures and handles all of the logic differently. So when you buy an object, the money module ties into what's called the I buy sell module and verifies that the object was actually delivered. Or at least in Globit we do that, and we reverse the transaction if it doesn't get delivered properly. When you pay a user versus paying an object, we need to detect that is a user or an object. If it's an object, we need to pull the owner out so we know who to pay. That logic is not happening in Core. And this was part of the misconception. When Core started talking to me, they said, the money module should be stupid and should just move money. And I said, have you looked at the money module? And they're like, no, because we don't like them. I'm putting a little bit of words into their mouth there. But ultimately, part of what they did was I captured an event in the module the way I did this initially, where it wouldn't have affected any other module or Core and would not have broken anything. And I did all the logic. I pulled out of that event all of the information I needed. I checked I grabbed the land, the parcel access list. I made sure the person wasn't in there, or if they were with a pass already, that we added the time instead of overwriting it so that you could buy multiple times. And we updated the parcel access list. This is similar to how when someone buys an object, it is actually the money module that calls the I buy sell module and says, hey, deliver this to someone's inventory, deliver it as a copy, deliver it as an original, whatever. I don't think Core understands that all of that logic is happening in the money module. When I was trying to have this conversation, I think they thought that Core is handling the logic of all of those things, and they thought this was going to be a new thing, that the money module was handling logic it shouldn't. And I will agree that it would be better if we're not hitting the land parcel access list. But there was no code to implement this in Core. I had users that wanted it. It's frankly not much different. If they want to implement it down the road, I was happy to work with them. I was passing that knowledge along. So I implemented this. This is why it doesn't work in most other money modules, because most, like myself, were not even aware of this flow or this transaction. And
Sure.
there wasn't a lot of demand for it. When I initially mentioned it to Core, they said, no one uses this. Why are you going to do it? And I said,
Because they don't know about it.
yeah, I said,
Full
I have a
stop.
couple of users, and if we'll be the only module that has it for a while until other people catch on, maybe it means some new worlds. Maybe it means a new revenue model. That's fine. And I don't think they thought I was going to do it. And then I did. And so eventually, after our full argumentative state, the core engineer that did it admitted to me that he rushed to do this because he wanted to get it out before I released, out of fear that once I released code, it would be harder for them to intentionally break it and take over that flow. And so he kind of feared that I was going to create a standard that they would maybe feel they needed to live up to down the road. So there was kind of an admission that they rushed out a modification to preempt my release. And it made my work a lot harder because they broke my implementation, which I spent a few days on. I spent a few days trying to get them to do this in a way that wouldn't break money modules, but they still did. I now had a new flow I had to implement to make this work in my module, and a breaking change to the money module that I had to fix and release a patch, for my users. And so a lot of folks, to some extent, were the impetus because we were implementing a feature for users. But ultimately, when Core went to do this, I tried to tell them off the bat, you don't have the tools in the money module interface to handle this properly the way you want to. I tried to tell them other ways to do it. They didn't want to listen. When they finally got there and they built it a certain way, I said, the way you have built this, there are cases where the payment will fail and someone will still get their land pass. And I, as a money module owner, will not enable that flow. I'm sorry. If there's a tiny, tiny risk, if there are weird corner cases, I'll consider it. But right now, a malicious user might be able to find a way to just make this happen all the time. And, as a money module, if I've got, one thing I need to uphold with transactions, it is a user pays and gets their item, or a user doesn't pay properly and doesn't get their item. Really, it's a broken transaction system if it's a regular occurrence that, that you have either someone pays and doesn't get it or doesn't pay and gets it. And they created a flow where that was a legitimate frequency.
I have to admit, somebody that very occasionally uses, money balance. I don't really go in for commerce, but I've never thought to think that things like you've just told me, that like the logic stream behind buying an object is different from the logic stream of just giving a friend some money as a gift. We've had endless talks here over the years about, the need for a dedicated OpenSim viewer, hypergrid viewer. And we've also had conversations about not so much just the need for a dedicated viewer, but something that's modular. In other words, a modular system would enable something like a Globits to be developed as kind of a plugin that will rest easily. Where it could be a plugin for the viewer that connects with the back end and rests easily with the core code. But increasingly, what you've been saying here, I'm sensing there's so much complexity in the core code that it's not something that can just be plugged in, because you've got the core people saying, oh well, we've got to do this bit this way, and I can quite understand that they in general, I don't know how to put this politely, aren't too keen on you because those devs tend to be rather anti-commerce. Commerce is not their interest. They refuse anything to do with commerce as a rule. They don't even want, commercial people contributing code because they think it's a hidden agenda, and they won't take sponsorship because they think it involves commitments to outside parties. It's a tricky thing.
Yeah.
But
and I want to make it clear, they do, listen, they are folks that, like myself at times, are donating their time and are doing things, the goodness of their heart. So it doesn't mean they don't do great things, but I don't agree with them in all areas. They are areas of opinion, but I've got a lot of experience with large software development and large software systems. And so, one of the things with this is you're developing large systems. Occasionally you need to break an API, but there are processes that are generally accepted for how you do that when you're managing a system that people consume. And the part of the issue is that Core has made statements that they don't believe anyone should be making money off of OpenSim. I think it's foolish because most of their customers are here because people are making money, which supports the OpenSim grids that they're running on. So to try to claim that everyone making money on OpenSim should go to some other platform, I think they'd lose 90% of their customers. But say you're going to make a change.
How in the heck are we going to pay our servers and anything else that had cost us as grid owners money?
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah,
So,
even the non-profit grid's got overheads, you know.
Yeah, and they basically hope that somebody will donate. If tomorrow, let's say no one did anything for Osgrid or Metropolis, where do you think they'd be today?
Yeah, and so, you know, let's get by that for a minute. Okay, when you need to make a change, you can look at, are there ways to do this without breaking an API? I actually gave them a couple suggestions. I won't go into details because it's, unless you're an engineer, you know, you won't understand it. Okay, 2, let's decide you go with.
I don't even know how to put my shoes on right, so don't get too techie on me.
Yeah. I was going to say, you're not allowed to put the host to sleep.
Right? So now let's assume you choose a path where you do say we're going to make a breaking change to an API. There are 2 things that are usually standards that people use to do that. One is that they announce that it's going to happen, and they announce, hey, we're going to deprecate support that was X, and we're going to move to this new interface at such and such a version. And you give people time to integrate and implement that. You don't just, you know, and then, you know, third, you know, one of the things that they did that was even more extreme, so they didn't do that. They just put this in that week. Basically, they jumped in, they wrote code, they didn't discuss it with anyone, they didn't take feedback from money module creators, from grid owners, and it just went in. I went in and found a couple of bugs, found, hey, this is a problem. So, you know, I hit a point where I said, listen, you can fix this way with an event that doesn't break APIs. They didn't want to do that. And I said, well, the only other way that I can think of right now off the top of my head is you add an interface function that, you know, that lets you know if the money transaction succeeded or failed, which, you know, for all of the money modules that don't implement that yet, they're going to break. Okay, they put that into 0.9.1 dev, and in my head, 0.9.0 release is not out yet. There's going to be, you know, at least a couple of months before a 9.1 dev comes out, so people have a little bit of time. A week or 2 later, I get a call from someone that they're on 0.9.0 release and Globit's not working. And I jump in, and Core pulled all of the changes from the 0.9.1 dev line into 0.9.0 release. After the release candidates, you should not be pulling anything into a release that wasn't in a release candidate except for bug fixes. That's what the release candidates are there, so that you test things, so that things have some time in the wild to make sure there's nothing that surprises you before you make the release. Those changes shouldn't have been in until 0.9.1 dev. I'm sorry, that's not professional. When I went to them and explained no one does this, they're like, yeah, we didn't want to wait. And that was pretty much what I got. I didn't get a discussion over it. So, hey, it's their prerogative. They run it. But I really don't want anyone to think that I am to blame or that Globit is to blame for a broken change. What they should know is that I spent a week of misery in the OpenSim Dev IRC channel begging and fighting and pleading. And if any other currency module owner was in there, if any of these grid owners were in there, maybe we could have made something happen. But I was in there fighting effectively by myself. And so to have folks in the community now try to blame me and say it was my fault, where were you when I was begging them not to do this? Is effectively, you know, I was in there, it wasn't quite by myself. I had, you know, ZetaMex and DigiWorlds folks working with me, I think, at the time, and I was very frustrating, but that's what happened. Yes, I was the impetus because I implemented a feature, but I tried everything I could. You know, I did it without Core. When Core decided they were effectively going to make changes truly to break my module and break my implementation, I fixed it for my users. I tried to guide them to a path that wouldn't break other money modules. They refused. And, you know, and I tried to at least guide them once they made that decision to make a flow that was a legit transaction.
So to what extent, if any, is this such an ongoing problem now? I mean, obviously not all are using the 9 series release yet. And are you still coming across, are there still modifications that you need to make in some cases?
Globit has fixed everything. we within 2 weeks, as soon as I found out about it, I got in and I patched our system.
Right.
So within 2 weeks of the 0.9.0 release coming out, Globit had a DLL out, and I made a blog post and I told people to update to the latest DLL. So I'm not aware of anyone that's running Globit that has a break. But anyone that's on another third-party module that is on 0.9.0 release or a recent 0.9.1 dev, it probably broke because it basically would fail to link at the beginning. It would see a function that it expects to exist that was not implemented and would throw an error, I think. I haven't double checked, anyway, someone that ran OMC told me that they reverted that one change and just removed those commits that Core made. And that was how they fixed it. The proper thing is for third-party money modules, assuming anyone is still maintaining them, is to go in and implement that. Even if they don't implement the flow and land pass sales don't work, to just implement the function and just have it return false to say this transaction wasn't successful because we don't handle it. And that would fix it.
Is it going to be any patches or updates for people using not the 9? Like we're running on 8.2, I think it is, because we don't want to touch 9 at the moment.
Yeah. I don't think you'd be affected because you won't change. Yeah.
So no money module should break for you because you don't have the new code. Globit, if you're using Globit, you can still do land pass sales because our initial implementation still works. And rather than remove that, we toggle based on the version of OpenSIM that you're running, whether we use our implementation or whether we use the core one if you're on 0.9.0 or later. So you can do land pass sales. The only thing that was not in 0.8 regarding that is auto booting of folks when their time runs out. So sometime in 0.9, I believe 0.0 dev, Core implemented, which had never been implemented in OpenSIM, spotting when your time runs out and booting the avatar out of that parcel. So in 0.8, you can sell land passes through Globit, but you would have to manually boot someone. Once they leave, they won't be able to return, but if their time goes to 0, they aren't kicked out of the venue.
Okay, rather than spend too much time on specifics, so I think we're picking up on a lot here. Yeah. Just putting aside Globits for a minute, I'd like to ask you personally, right? Lot of issues, contentious issues come onto the show, in fact. For a long time, I mentioned earlier that, so many people say, OpenSIM needs its own viewer and it needs to be a viewer built to scratch without the Linden code. Somebody at OS Grid was telling me, well, actually, we want to keep some of that Linden stuff. And I got the impression they want to keep it so they don't have to redo it. Whereas I think it's sort of a bit redundant. But, the other issue, of course, is that you get certain people going off and maybe they're frustrated with the folks at Vanilla Core and they do rewrites themselves and of the whole code base and things. And I just want really your personal thoughts, given the Globits and money module issues aside.
Yeah.
What? I won't ask you what the impetus is because nobody has an answer for this. But what import would you put on? If you were actually, would you call a dedicated viewer for the hypergrid and a thorough code rewrite going deep, as it were, and possibly implementing modular plugin system? What kind of priority would give you that? I mean, it costs a lot of money, so we're not talking about that. I'm saying, is it something we could really, really use? Both those, really, the dedicated viewer and, a complete modular rewrite of the code.
You've got a couple of issues here. I'm going to be honest. Yeah. I don't see it happening both because of politics and because of challenge and because there's not enough money coming in probably from the 50 to 100,000 monthly active users. You've got 1 million users. You got the amount that Second Life has.
I'm not actually really referring to the likelihood of it being done. I would just say if it could be done, would you think that is a high priority? I'm not saying it can be done, but it gets spoken about quite a lot, and people talk about getting research grants and all sorts of things. I'm just keen to know your personal opinion on, given your own instincts. Do you think all this needs to be kind of kick-started? We're backwards compatibility, of course, but
I'm gonna say that I don't know if I actually have enough expertise to know what like the challenges would be. So off the top of my head, some of the issues are, one, you've got two pieces of software that communicate and are run by different teams. They're not run by one company. So you've got a viewer and a server. So if you want to rewrite one, unless you still want to have it use all of the same communication protocols, you've got to get the other side to agree. So that design has to start with, first of all, the various viewers out there, whoever's going to write this, deciding from a viewer perspective what is good, and sitting down with the core team and them agreeing that it is worth the effort and they want to move to this. Then you probably also need to agree that you're fine with not being compatible with Second Life, because I can't see you making these modifications and still maintaining compatibility with Second Life. Now, that's fine to me, but as far as I can tell, every viewer out there seems to want to still have their users be able to log into Second Life with the viewer, not just OpenSim. I think that's a real limiting factor. But that's where people have gone. So if you can come to terms on that, and a viewer decides we're fine, and OpenSim decides we're going to change our protocols to a way that viewers can't still be compatible with Second Life, we're going to diverge, and you can get that rewrite, you could get a lot of positives out of it. But there's a lot of effort there. To speak toward one of the other things, because it applies to this, that was tossed at us, it was, hey, why are you doing currency stuff when someone comes onto a region? That info should just be sent with a transaction. A user doesn't need it until a transaction is started, and that's when the viewer should send it to the server. Well, two things. One, your currency and your balance are in the top of the viewer the minute you enter a region, so it is relevant right away. But ignoring that, let's assume it wasn't there, and let's assume that that you didn't need it till transaction time. The fact of the matter is that's not how those communication protocols work. If you want to have that currency displayed later, you now need, UI, or you want a user to be able to choose. Someone else said they should be able to choose between what currency they want to use when they're about to buy an object. Okay, now you need UI when someone's setting up an object to sell, to price in multiple currencies. You need a communication protocol for the server to accept it. You need the server to store that information with an item in databases. You need the server to have a communication protocol to send that back to the viewer along with an item. You need new UI on the viewer for display of a purchase box that shows the different currencies and different purchase prices. You need a way for a user to select what currency they want to buy in. You need a new communication protocol for the viewer to send what currency or service the user has chosen with a purchase price. Now, every payment flow that goes to the money module needs to carry additional information that isn't there. You basically need a whole rewrite of the money module system. The current system only expects one money module to be enabled per region. So you frankly need a whole redesign of how that system works so that it can choose what money module is getting the purchase event. Or those money modules need to rewrite their code to say, hey, this wasn't in my currency, I'm going to ignore this call. Off the top of my head, those are just the changes because someone said something simple like, hey, I want to send the currency symbol, at the time of purchase, or I want to choose between 2 or 3 currencies when I purchase an item. That you sometimes don't, to an end user, that can sound really simple. And from someone doing large system software design, sometimes those things are simple. Sometimes they are not. This is one of those cases where, it's not to say those things can't be changed, but it's not going to happen in a week.
I mean, what you're saying is an ideal world, but it's no. I mean, from a designer point of view, I know that the code for the interface would have to seriously change. The module would have to be a sort of switching mechanism or conversion mechanism, and as you say, I mean, there is what's the point in converting incompatible currencies anyway? I mean, it's like the Podex thing not working between Canada and Great Canadian Grid. I mean, I like the modular thing, the plugin thing, but I do appreciate that, whatever that system will be, would we get, for everything you stick on an interface and think, oh, let me have that button, the lines of code and the strings and the links that attach to here, there, and everywhere are colossal. They're just
two more things on this. One is, I think plugins are the best way to go with open source software. I like with the money module how you can use a different module, and the reason is, as people fork the server and the viewer, it's really hard for third parties to support the multiple forks. I built for vanilla OpenSim. I have users that have wanted to switch or have switched to other versions and if they use the same money module calls, great, our module will work. But it's, I don't have a large staff. It's hard enough for me to stay up on things changing and problems that people have on vanilla OpenSim. Now, if there are 2, 3, 4, what's the user base on that? I would much rather that they were like, hey, we use vanilla OpenSim and we have these 2 or 3 plugins where we replace physics or we replace, whatever. I would rather that you had one base viewer code and you had, the different systems or different plugins on that that were by default installed or, removed, not a change to the real underlying core code. I think that would be better for the whole system. We're not there. It's what it is. The other thing I'll mention is just how likely is this to happen. So, it would be great if I, as a money module creator, didn't need to spend a year building a money module, discovering through uncommented code what are the flows that the calls come through, having to tie into 10, 15 different flows to figure out how information is coming in. So I would love it if a call came in that was one function call for any type of purchase, and it had in it, hey, this is the transaction type, and here's the information you need. To give you an idea of how unlikely that is, when Core decided they would implement land pass sales, I said, if you're going to make a new function, let's at least make it usable in the long run. I said, here's what I want. As the money module, I want to be able to finish this flow. I want a callback function, and then I want a dictionary. I want a set of information, which is a key and value pair system that, hey, when it's a land transaction, you can send me the parcel name and ID and info, the land info. If it's to an object, you can send me the object name and description and the owner and whatever. So I don't have to look this up. You don't want my money module making calls into Core? Send me the information I need so I can put it in someone's transaction history so they have it. So I have the information of who I need to pay. They absolutely refused. They said, you're getting a string, and that's what you can put in someone's description, and that is what we want you to have. We believe it's a privacy issue. They absolutely refused. And when I said, hey, you're not going to be able to use this function for other things in the future, they said, yeah, but we don't yet. And when we get there, if we need a dictionary or more information, we'll modify it then. And I said, so you'll break the money module interface again instead of planning for it now. And I could not get through to them to build this in a way that was more fluid. Listen, I've done this type of design work. I tried. So if you're going to tell me I can't for one function get it done, that someone else is going to redesign the whole viewer and get the core team to buy on with future planning that frankly takes the type of people who have spent decades working on large systems to understand when it's good to do that and when it's good to lock down a system to very strict information. I just don't see that.
I think this is sad. I mean, we get with OpenSim in a lot of cases. I mean, to quote the old song, the song title, it's a communication breakdown.
I hope the Core team doesn't, hear this and get mad at me. I think we had these discussions, they were on IRC, they were in public, and it's a difference of opinion, and they're welcome to come on your show and explain why they made these choices. But when you ask me if this stuff can happen, that's a personal experience that says to me, it can't.
I was really just talking about general sense of whether you would approve or not, even though the likelihood of it happening is remote.
Yeah, long run, I love it if things went to plugins. And the only reason we could, why we could do a money module for OpenSim is because someone at one point had the forethought to make the monetary component a separate module that handled these things. It wasn't easy, but it was doable because I didn't have to get Core to adopt a bunch of changes to make a Globit work. Because I didn't have to change Core. I had to change a plugin, and C#, which is what this stuff runs on, is designed so that you can have add-in modules that link in. It's not perfect, but it works pretty well. And OpenSim, takes advantage of that. So yeah, am I in favor of that? Absolutely. It's a lot harder once a system is out to move to that. And you need to get a lot of existing people to decide we want to go. You look at Second Life. They just made a decision not to just continue to improve Second Life. They built, what's the new product called?
Sansar.
Sansar. And they made a decision. They said, you know what? We can't move Second Life as it is and just continue to improve it. We're going to continue to operate Second Life, and we're going to start over with all the knowledge we have and build a new virtual world platform that doesn't have to deal with all the code debt and all the expectations of the users that have been built up.
Exactly.
And that's why they made that decision. So how could I see it happening? I could see it happening, frankly, as OpenSim 2.0.
I look at, people like Adam Frisby, who obviously was one of the founders of OpenSim way back before we even had our hypergrid, and, he's now CEO of ScienceSpace. And to me, that is like Linden Lab starting Sansar. It's not a rebuild, or it's a new product, a totally different new product for a new time, and they think it works. And in fact, Sansar and ScienceSpace have an awful lot in common. Well, obviously, ScienceSpace is a bit further ahead, but they didn't do what Linden did, which is rewrite their own engine. They still use other back ends, but no, that's the point. I don't think there will be an OpenSim 2.0. I mean, because the future. In the future, people are going to develop other platforms, and OpenSim may be really just a legacy thing. I think the selling point of OpenSim at the moment, which nobody else has, is the hypergrid, the functionality of connecting grids together. And none of the new platforms have this. They're all standalone platforms.
I absolutely agree, and it's why we chose, when we were looking at things, and we said, listen, my first iteration with Currency, I tried to do it for games. There are lots of reasons that it didn't work, and then I started looking at where do I want to bring this in. And I wanted a place that had commerce, but that also, the features that we could provide, they could take advantage of. And it's because of the hypergrid that there was an opportunity here, and that OpenSim was appealing. And I think the hypergrid is an amazing concept. You put it so clearly. It's like being able to click on URLs on the web and get to another web page. Imagine that you had to, you're logged into CNN.com, and to go to, Facebook or Huffington Post or, pick your website, you had to log out of your browser and log back in and hook up a new
necessarily
account.
Not happening either.
I mean, think about that for a minute.
Are you a Star Trek fan?
So, I think the hypergrid is amazing. And this is part of why, listen, I spoke a little bit about what we did with land pass sales that hopefully people understand. We did our best, and I apologize for anyone who caused problems, but we worked hard. It wasn't due to anything that we tried to do. And now we tried to build something because, frankly, I think the hypergrid is amazing. And I'm like, why are things broken when I hypergrid teleport? And when I jumped into the viewer code to go, hey, can I do something? And I found out, oh my goodness, these things are just set statically at login. No one has ever updated the viewer code since people enabled, hypergrid teleports to update certain pieces of information. And I said, I've got the expertise. I'm going to work on this. And someone in Firestorm, if you go to the Jira, you can see it in the comment thread, was kind enough when I said, listen, I can't dig through every function. Can you point me to the direction of the file or the function that X might be happening in, so I know where to start digging? Someone was kind enough to do that because I was not experienced in their viewer code. Yeah. And I jumped in and I said, let me update this. So like I said, even if you don't use Globit, the patch that I really hope they adopt and I've supplied makes hypergridding better. Right. And I think that is what sets, OpenSim is going to stay relevant and is going to be part of the emerging virtual reality space. It will be because of hypergrid. If they're relevant in terms of people just adopting protocols and people look back to say, who was the grandfather of X? It's going to be that people adopt and look at the way hypergrid teleporting worked and go, you know what, that's a great protocol for this. And we're going to use that. Maybe we need to tweak it, but we're going to take from OpenSim and we're going to build that in. And I agree, OpenSim's not the grandfather of, this virtual space on a computer. That's Second Life and probably some others before Second Life, right? But what they did differently that Second Life never adopted, because Second Life's kind of the AOL of the internet, is
of the virtual world, you mean?
Yeah, the virtual world, right? Is that, hey, we're going to be open and let people move around, and it's been cool. So, anyway, what I wanted to come on for today was to talk about that patch and allay some concerns and say, hey, this patch isn't going to break any money modules, isn't going to increase region lag, doesn't do a bunch of unnecessary things, and no, you cannot just say, hey, we'll just modify the transaction flow. Good luck. That would have been at best months and months and months of work. I know what I'm doing, as does Cinder. We worked on something that is a short-term fix. It was not a long-term system redesign. It was a quick bug fix and feature implementation. And it should not break anything or hinder anyone. Anyone that chooses not to use Globit and doesn't, it'll still work for them.
Yeah, let me move into again. I warned you this in advance because I was asked to ask you this question, and I know the answer, and it's pretty bloody obvious answer if you ask me. But I'm going to let you do it. A couple of people, I'm a big fan of, the free hypergrid in the sense of, being able to go around and collect stuff here, there, and everywhere without it costing much money, even to the extent of running a grid on the desktop these days. But, I also recognize that, at the moment you're dealing with hosting providers, space on grids and stuff like that. Even the non-profits have overheads, so commerce, or at least finance, comes into it. But it was put to me that, maybe Globits is a bit like a PayPal for virtual worlds, which is sort of what you said that yourself, and that I'm assuming it's the way I was thinking of it. This universal wallet that I can wander around, in certain places and use, and on the hypergrid particularly because it's so vast. But people are saying to me, but isn't this just a year old or something? I mean, you can have great trust in people, but sometimes businesses don't work, and even the best of people have to forced to bankruptcy and things. And what guarantees have I got against the money I put into this? And even though it's microtransactions, people seem to be concerned. Naturally, I suppose, like the way I never used PayPal until it was ubiquitous. What's your answer to people who say, well, it's a bit early yet, can I trust these people? And I'm not talking about codes or anything else like this. I think we've had enough code for one day, I think. I'm just talking about the general user who's a bit skeptical about. They've made love the idea that they have a wallet that can go all over the hypergrid with them. So that's the big plus selling thing to them.
Yes.
But opening the account and the investment side of it, I mean, most people will probably just put a small amount of money in and, keep the balance, as, risk factor. But, some people will always want to make a bit of a noise about this. Oh, they're new and we've been in Second Life and there were so many banks opened up and they all ran away with our money and stuff like that. So what can you offer people who kind of follow that thread, shall I say?
Yeah, no, and it's not a bad question. Any place outside of OpenSim as well that you're going to give money to, you should ask, are these people trustworthy? And frankly, nothing is ever 100% safe. We've had banks in the U.S. with banking licenses closed down, and we have FDIC insurance to try to help prevent people from losing money, but it happens. PayPal could close up shop, could do something illegal, and could, even if they don't close up shop, could freeze your account. They've been known to do that. So I think the risk is incredibly small, but it doesn't mean it's zero, that even a PayPal is someone that large. So the question isn't, is this company at risk or not? It is, how much are they at risk? Do I trust them? What are their policies? What are their procedures? One thing I would say is, I wouldn't hesitate from trying things, but I would think about how much money you store somewhere. So, hey, I wouldn't recommend that you buy $1,000 worth of Globits and leave it in your account. You don't need it there. It just adds to your risk. But are you really worried if you've got $20 in there? Is that a loss you can't afford? As far as our system, we've worked hard. I intend to continue to run it. We have 30 some odd worlds on. We have hundreds of users, actually thousands that have signed up. We've got tens, if not hundreds, that cash out proceeds. And I'd recommend, if you're worried, buy in and use your funds. Or if you're a merchant that is at all concerned, cash out more, sell your Globits and cash out more frequently. We'd rather that people don't accrue large piles of Globits. It adds volatility to our system, when they sell in large bundles. So we're fine with that. In addition,
I presume also that from an actual operating point of view, the more in-out transactions for you, the better, because you take a comparatively small commission on the transactions, and most people won't notice. It's often in with the vendors. My
goal, what I would actually love is for people to spend the Globits multiple times. So what would be best for us is if people really set up environments where there are different ways for different types of users to spend. So, I run a store and I accept Globits. It would be awesome if I can pay for my store rental or my region rental in Globits. And we have some grids that are looking to even give them web widgets so people can pay on the web with Globits. If people start doing more and more entertainment events, I might be a merchant that normally would cash out my proceeds, but if I can spend it to tip this performer or to buy a pass to such and such event, maybe now that's more that I'll spend. And now that performer might say, hey, I need a new instrument. I need more clothing. So we would love to see things cycle. We do make a small margin on the purchase and sale of Globits, though a lot of that goes to cover our payment processing fees. So, we have fees, fraud prevention, payment processing when people cash in and out, as well. But I would love to see people just have more ways to spend.
Okay.
Second Life, for instance, to give you guys some data, and this is, I'm sure, higher than OpenSim. On average, when I was there, a linen dollar was spent 6 to 7 times before it was cashed out, which is huge for an economy. That means, on average. So sure, some were spent once and cashed out. Some were just traded on the exchange, and some probably got spent 20 times. But that's where I want to get to. And as we become the PayPal of VR, that's where we want to get to, where you even say, oh, geez, awesome, there's this other platform that I use, and they accept Globits. So rather than cash them out, I can go spend them there on what I want. What I would say is every place that we are makes us more likely to stick around. So ZanGrid closing, not for any bad reason, and I think that Suze is working with people, gave them plenty of notice, and is working with people who have the other local currencies to spend that. I don't know what she's doing. I haven't looked at the details, but I know she reached out to folks and said, check to see if you've got currency. But, by the way, grids close. Some close well like that. Some go out of business overnight, and you're like, wait a minute, I had all of this currency on file. Suze is closing up, ZanGrid, and we basically said, you've got Globits? No problem. You can spend them everywhere else. It's not tied to ZanGrid. It's tied to your Globit account. So I do think that we are less risky than pretty much any grid specific currency, unless that grid is truly one of the few gigantic grids that you really believe is safe. But even some of those, wasn't Avanation huge when it shut down?
Well, we have the opposite. We have this is a rather amusing, really quite funny chap, but he's got a grid. I've forgotten his name now. We call him the yo-yo grid because he comes up and down every week with a new idea and a new plan.
Close this grid, opens it up, close it, opens it up, close it, open it up.
Oh my goodness.
That's when you think it's the final down. A bit pops again, and it even temporarily pops up back in Second Life as an interim before bouncing back. I'd hate to be monitoring the fiscal flow of anybody in that grid, but that's an aside. Getting back now on to the main. I think the main thing a lot of our viewers they're just thinking in terms of usability. So there's risk in everything, but you've answered the question about security. There are another few things like. You're going to be on a panel at OSCC. It won't be it's going to be hosted by Melanie Milland, who's quite into commerce. And I know that one of the other people on the panel, as well as you, is Ilan from Kitely.
Yep.
And obviously, something that's been very successful in the commerce field, and even the anti-commerce people seem to take it as a kind of, oh, I'll go get that on the Kitely marketplace. Delivering across the hypergrid and stuff like that is a different venture entirely, because they're actually selling products rather than handling the cash itself, the financial affairs. But it's a similar operation in the sense that they're addressing the hypergrid, they're addressing multiple grids, and they're selling in that system. And I've actually got two questions. One is whether you have any interaction there, and B is in your long-term agenda, do you see Globits possibly expanding into areas other than just financial transaction, goods across the hypergrid or something like that?
So first part, we did at some point, I think on Google Plus, during some common thread I mentioned to Elon, we'd be happy to work with him to enable Globit on, the Kitely OpenSim grid, for Kitely. He made it very clear that he, was not interested in that. And I said, hey, it's a matter of providing choice to your users. What we've tried to do is say, hey, we believe we can provide the best platform, and we want to let people have that choice. And if we are the best, people will choose us. We'll expand on grids. So anyway, I don't at the moment see it. We are more than happy. I would love it if people who had Globits could go to the Kitely marketplace and use them there, and could use them on Kitely grid and on every grid. But that's their prerogative. That's up to him as a website platform owner and as a grid owner to make that choice. At the moment, as far as I know, he has no plans to adopt anything else. And there are reasons. He makes probably a good profit with his Kitely credits. He has certain things that are secure, and he's a player that has a stable infrastructure. I don't know what the risks are for him. As far as us building something, we've had plenty of customers ask us if we would build a competing marketplace because it would likely be less expensive. I have not wanted to compete with our customers. I want to build a currency, but the same reason I haven't launched a Globit grid. I don't want to compete with the folks that I'm asking to use our system and have them funding a competing grid somewhere where I'm vying with them to get merchants on and rent things. We may bring something up to test eventually, more like an expo space, whatever, but I don't want to compete with the hosting providers or the grid owners. I'd rather work with them. I'd rather specialize in commerce. Early on, before we moved to OpenSim, we did have some inventory systems for gaming companies and ways they could list products. Frankly, it's a lot more complex in OpenSim. I would rather work with someone who is building a marketplace to say, hey, you know what? Why don't you specialize in this? And we'll work with you to make sure Globit is implemented well, and you launch a web marketplace that competes with Kitely, or a hypergrid delivery system that competes with whatever other vending machine system, and have it use Globit. And, and it'll be another reason to use Globit, and it'll be a boon.
I think that's quite wise, because you do see, especially in the frontier sort of places like here, people do a bit of this and a bit of that, and there's too much competition where there really doesn't need to be, because there's still space for people to do a whole lot of new things and work together. Anything that gets big enough eventually is a platform for some kind of competition, but where you don't need it. If you can concentrate on what you do and you do it well, and it gets a bit established, then that I think is the best way to go. Focus on what your thing is, but equally, as time goes by, you may find, you might find there's an avenue for something completely new. And you realise that, hey, we got the backbone that can, be used as a transport for that new thing. It's not necessarily saying virtual goods. It won't necessarily be whatever the other thing it was you mentioned, something may come up and people think, God, that's what we need. And then somebody think, hey, well, hang on, haven't Globit's got a sort of back end that could possibly facilitate that? So, I'm thinking more like there, because none of us know what the future is. A long-term strategy is very much a whim anyway, isn't it?
Yeah, and we want folks, if people are building things, please reach out to me directly, and we'll talk. One is, we work through we have some API documentation up. Frankly, a lot of it's old. I haven't updated it since we really made a lot of modifications to make things work better as we test it with OpenSim. But we do plan to open source our Globit money module for OpenSim as soon as I can clean up some more of the code there. And that'll also serve as hey, you can see the code here, take this and, modify it, use pieces of it to make Globit work with whatever. Maybe we can move to other platforms faster. So we're in favor of that. One other big thing is if anyone's looking at doing a marketplace, I'll tell you one thing that I would want to work with someone to do. We charge 3% on a transaction, 2% goes to us, 1% goes to the app owner, the grid owner, the region owner who set it up. If people are going to do something like a Kitely marketplace does, I frankly would want to look at carving out some part of that. And, listen, it's probably someone does a marketplace, it's not going to be 3% because they need to make money on it as well. And there are other costs running a marketplace. But one of my goals would be, hey, I want to take a percentage and give it to whoever is running the inventory system. Because at the end of the day, you can run a web marketplace all you want. But when you're delivering on the hypergrid, you're hitting some grid's inventory system that they need to store that they need to res it, that their servers are being hit. It's like if you were Amazon and you didn't have to pay UPS to deliver your packages.
Yeah.
And so one thing that I think would be really big if anyone's looking at it is if a marketplace popped up that said, you know what, we're not going to carve these people out. We'll work with some sort of protocol to know who owns the inventory system and know who to send money to. I would be happy to work from Globit's end to go, how do we tie that into the transaction and send 1%, whatever it is that is necessary to them, 0.5%. I don't know what it is. Sure. But I think those people should make some money. They're footing the bill for that showing up. So that is one big thing that when I early on started and when I get people that ask me to build competing marketplaces, what they don't like about the Kitely marketplace. Hey, Kitely is welcome to take that knowledge, I'm sure they've got it, and build it in and start paying folks. But in most spaces, until a competitor pops up and does it, people don't give away part of their money. So anyway, that's what I'd love to see. But we're happy to work with folks. We really don't want to build. We want to be the backbone. We want to be the commerce backbone. We don't want to be, the user touch point. We want other people to build those. And that way we can specialize in fraud prevention, in fast, stable transactions, and not spend our time building the UI around new products. So that's our goal.
Okay, yeah, I mean, it seems to be in hypergridding and everything else, it's actually users' inventories even are still glitchy, so maybe somebody coming with a magic service, as it were, that would just sort that out, instead, I always think that everything in my suitcase travels with me and my local inventory stays behind, but it's not that simple. The local inventory still follows in a shipping container. The control set seems to need a lot of work too. Yeah. So it's not just the goods themselves; it's the whole way they're handled. I was just going to move to Leslie and James to see if Leslie's got any other questions. She's actually just put, I think it's Leslie, just somebody says in our own chat, actually, can't seem to get the scripts or other items to go to other grids. That is Leslie. We're looking at doing that. Do you want to elaborate on that, Leslie?
Well, the biggest problem is that you have to have someone that understands basically how Kitely's doing it. If I create a marketplace, which we've tried, we can do it locally in our grid, make a marketplace. But how Kitely, if you buy it on Kitely Market, it'll go to any grid that's open for it. how do we get the items from here to there, to point A to point B, off the grid? We've asked Mr. Ivan if he would give us a little hint or suggestion how he does that. He basically told us no.
Trade secret, yeah.
Yes.
Trade secret, yes.
And I think that's the same with Chris. I think he just doesn't want to share his toys.
Well, listen, and I'll say this. I mean, he's spent time to build something. He doesn't necessarily have to. If he thinks that is IP that's vital to the success of his business, you make decisions on what you will and you won't share. There are times where it benefits your business and it doesn't. So if he thinks, geez, once people know this, there'll just be 20 competitors.
Exactly.
I get it, and it's up to him. It's maybe another reason for someone with the engineering expertise to dig in and figure it out. I'll tell you, I haven't looked at Kitely, but I acquired for Second Life X Street XL, which became the Second Life web marketplace. Forget what it was called before. It was called X Street. How did that work? If I recall, a user needed to put the items they were going to deliver in a box on the grid on Second Life. And, the web marketplace made a call into that box through protocols that Second Life had made available on the web to tell it, hey, send this item to this person. So anything listed on the website tied to a box that he gave people to put those items in. And then you had a certain way to set it up. Now, in this case,
the box, I know which one you mean.
Yeah. And so what's interesting that's different here is because you have a bunch of different grids, it's not like you've got a box on one grid. How is he saying, hey, such and such person wants this item delivered to their avatar on such and such grid? There might not be a box that merchant set up on every grid. So how does that item get delivered there? That's an interesting question. I haven't dug into that.
Maybe we can get together. We can work together on that.
I mean, I presume, yeah, I presume, given that the main communication channel here, again, is the killer app, the hypergrid. Yep. I imagine that it must somehow be calling on hypergrid protocols to identify which grid and which individual.
Yeah, but you gotta have the script and the PHPs and everything else goes with it to pull all that information and where to pull it from and how to get it back in.
That's the secret. That's the secret firewall back end. That is yep. Property. Yeah.
So in all likelihood, he has got people that have marked objects, full perm, hypergrid in a place that, allows hypergrid transport. And he probably has items in a box on the Kitely grid, is my guess that these merchants have done.
Well, I know you need to be a member of Kitely, period.
Yes, to sell,
in order
right?
to go onto that marketplace.
To buy as well, or just to sell?
Just to sell.
Yeah. So my guess is that they have to have a box on Kitely that has these things. And then I bet that he is doing that. He's using the way, however hypergrid allows users to transport inventory that's allowed off grid, he is using that to pull the item out of that inventory and say, hey, deliver this to so-and-so's inventory on such and such grid. I don't understand the permissions necessarily around that.
I'm not worried about that. I'm more worried about how to get it out.
But that's my guess. So if you wanted to do it, you would probably need a grid up. At least the way he's done is my guess. So say Tangle was going to create a Tangle marketplace deliverable everywhere. You would probably have to create a place on Tangle Grid where merchants could put a box and put the items in there. And then, a URL with a product on their website would be tied to a specific item in that merchant's box. And when some other buyer buys that, you would grab that out of that box, and then it probably is some sort of hypergrid protocols, I'd have to look, or inventory protocols that allow an item to be passed across the hypergrid to just find that user and send them that item.
You can just send me your email address, and I'm more than happy to discuss it with you. And Globits will be the main source of payment.
Very good.
The other thing I can do, by the way, is I can look up, I don't know that he wants to do anything in this, but I do know, I haven't talked to him in a long time, the gentleman who did create X Street SL. I have wondered in my head if he is interested in creating a new marketplace. So,
hey,
it's very odd. I often wonder what happened to those people, because there was S3SL, and I think there was another one, wasn't there, that eventually also two were bought in by Linden's into the Linden marketplace.
Yeah, the other one was not doing incredibly well. X Street SL was really beating it out. So we did purchase them as well and effectively shut that marketplace down and just go with X Street. But yeah, the person who founded that and his team, a lot of his team came on. He was, I think, at Second Life for at least a couple of years. And then he went off to some other software companies. Last time I talked to him, he had a full-time job somewhere. And he was a pretty good engineer. Yeah. So
I got one more little question for you about the GloBits thingy. You answered one already. I was listening, believe it or not. When you just copy and paste that. When you okay, you said about the thing popping up. Do you want to buy the GloBits? Blah blah blah. That's something you're working on. The other thing is, it happened to me when I was DJing the other day. Someone tried to pay my tip jar. The only thing was they had not registered Tangle in the back office. Is there some way that as soon as you hit a region that is not in your, I can't remember what you call it. You call it something.
Approved apps.
Approved apps. Yeah. Is there some way that maybe that can pop up and say, would you like to add this region or this grid to your apps without having to go through the back office all the way around to add it and then come all the way back? Because a lot of people think the GloBits, you have them in your pocket, you go to another grid or another region, and you can buy. That's not the case, is it? App needs to be in your list.
That's right. So what we do is when we spot a user, say someone teleports into Tangle, and they have not approved Tangle Grid yet, what they should get is a message that says, please click on this URL to approve Tangle Grid. And assuming they have a GloBit account that they're logged into, they go to their web browser, and that should just load the dialog, and they click approve. They get a little confirmation page that says success, and they come back to the viewer, and their balance is there. And all future trips, their balance just shows up, and they can spend.
But so they still need to go through the long way around to get that on.
Yeah, so part of the reason is we can't just do it from the website, like, hey, click on all these grids you want to approve. There might be something we could build there, but part of the issue is there is a handshake that happens between your grid with that user involved and then without that user involved, where we send a token back. So there's kind of two pieces of the security here, which increases the security. There's one on our side that we have stored that a user has authorized. And there's also the fact that we have sent a token to your grid that your grid has to send to us with requests about that user in the future. And part of that reason is if someone ever stole your key and secret, got a hold of those somehow, they cannot just mimic you and create transactions because they don't have those tokens that we've sent to your back end. So if we did it in a way that we just let a user on our website click, I want to approve these grids, these regions, whatever, ahead of time, we would lose half of our, security.
Well, I'm not talking about pre-doing them. I'm talking about if I was brand spanking new, landed on Tangle Grid, and I don't have that.
Well, you should just get that pop-up then. Are people not receiving that IM?
I don't know. I'm already a member, so I have.
So two things. So one, you should receive it. Two is until this viewer patch we made, you could not really. We couldn't confidently tie into that flow. So say someone isn't authorized, they go to buy. What happens is their balance shows as 0, and they want to pay 10, 20 GloBits, let's say. Okay. The flow that launches in the viewer is the insufficient funds flow. Right. And that is one of the ones that uses the helper URI. So unless the grid had it set up, properly and had it pointed at us, which means if they're not using us grid-wide, they're also doing it improperly for everyone else, we had no way to send them a Globit-specific message. So now, once this viewer patch gets accepted and people upgrade their viewers, what we can do is ideally they'll try to tip you, the insufficient funds flow will launch, and we'll be able to say, hey, you haven't authorized Globit. You need to authorize. Here's the link. Hey, they missed the IM. That's fine. They closed it out before because it wasn't relevant. Well, now it's relevant, and we can give them that URL then when they need it. Or, hey, you're authorized, but you only have 5 Globits in your account, and you're trying to pay 20. Come to this URL to buy Globits.
Exactly.
So that is part of why we released this patch for the viewer. We will be able to improve that flow, but until now, we couldn't do that.
This authorization, it basically takes place on your first transaction on a given grid or presumably a given region if it's a region-based authority.
Globit's region, yeah.
Yeah, the authorization of Globit doesn't actually at the moment happen with a transaction. It happens when you show up, we send you an IM with a URL that brings you to Globit's website to authorize. And that authorization is that avatar for that grid or app, that app on our side. And we record some things. What we can do now, or what we will be able to do as this patch is adopted, is some users do choose to skip that. They aren't ready to buy anything. Why am I going to go authorize to use a currency? But, now they go to buy and they go, wait, I'm not authorized. How do I do this?
Yeah, and then they go all the way through the back office to get to it again.
So what they can do right now is, except for in Singularity, because I don't think this functionality is in Singularity, but if you click your balance in the viewer, we have set that up to send you the authorization link or the buy currency link again. Singularity, they might have fixed this, but for a while that was sending a buy currency transaction instead of a balance update. But that is one way to force it right now. But once this new patch is in, we'll update on Globit's end in our DLL. We'll update the messaging that we provide because now we'll know, hey, awesome. And the great thing about this going not through a helper URI and some PHP script somewhere, but coming to our module, is that we can detect. We have everything on file. Without a bunch of database lookups, we can go, hey, is this user authorized? If not, give them the authorization link. If they are, they must have gotten here because they don't have enough funds. Let's send them the link to buy more Globits. And that'll be a really nice flow for users. And every other money module can do the same thing.
The other thing that might work there, I'm always for finding quick ways to get out of messes. Like you have, certainly in Firestorm, you've got buttons to send to Flickr, and with the Outworlds install, when you click the Destinations button, it pops up an Inworld web page with destinations and things. It would presumably possible. I reckon probably a user could do it. You could probably configure the login for approving Globits as media on the prim and put it on the HUD so you've always got it available. So you would simply go and confirm that way. Because So, it's a personal sort of thing that I was thinking, oh God, I go to this website too often. I'll just put it on the HUD.
By the way, and I'll mention too, when we started doing this, we chose to integrate with the built-in UI. The other way we could have gone for enabling Globit and OpenSIM was to build a HUD and say, hey, anyone who wants to use Globit, get this HUD, and then, regardless of where you are, you can, use the HUD. We chose not to go that way. But I will say we get some people who ask us, hey, I went to a show and I want to use my Globits and I want to tip a performer and it's not a Globit-enabled region. How do I do it? Yeah. And right now we don't have a good answer for that. Our answer is ask that venue to, consider doing shows on Globit-enabled regions. The other thing you could do is if you know what avatar that user has on a region that is Globit-enabled, you could teleport there, and then you could pay that user via the standard pay user UI within a Globit-enabled region. But it's unfortunate we don't have a good way to do that
The best thing to do is simply send them an IM saying, sorry, I can't tip you. You haven't got a Globit account. Maybe if they get enough messages, they'll get a Globit account.
Well, they might have a Globit account, but they might be playing a show somewhere that's not Globit enabled. So, anyway, we want to look at things. I mean, we want people to be able to spend their Globits, and we want performers to be paid. I am going to need to run, guys. I don't know if there's any final questions.
I was just thinking, because we're about sort of wrapping, if I can keep you 5 minutes more. James, is there anything pertinent come in from our comments, or have you got any questions yourself?
No questions from comments from the stream. I've just been cogitating on, Chris, your comment about someone needs to get together with the core developers, and it's like, is that possible? Do they get together in any one location at any one time other than the OSCC conference, I guess?
And can they answer
pretty distributed?
They're on the IRC channel. So OpenSim Dev is the way to do things. The issue is their goals as developers are not necessarily to support, especially for commerce grids, is to support, the functionality that you want. And that's an opinion whether it should be more aligned or not. But there are certain things that they're going to jump at fixing, and there are some things that are not a priority for them. But if you want to give it a shot, I would say the OpenSim Dev IRC channel is the place to try to have those conversations, or at least start them and say, hey, where is a discussion channel that we can move this to so it's not filling up IRC Dev with one topic.
Yep.
But that's where I go to talk to them.
Basic understanding, yeah. I don't understand IRC that much, and every time I log in, it's anybody here? Crickets.
Yeah, I'm the same. I think I actually have to get into a room and say something before I actually fully realize that there might be people in it, because I keep finding, there's people saying us online, but nobody's talking. I think there's something I'm not doing here.
It's a cultural thing that I don't understand, I think.
Yeah.
Okay, well, I'm sure there's a load of extra things I want to ask you, Chris, actually, but we will save it for another day. But I do like to wrap the show by asking anybody if anything else they'd like to comment on or tell us about while they're here, and also. Of course, I did say we would come back to anything else happening on Tangle Grid. So I think what I'll do, I'll do the anything else with you, Chris, and then say goodbye to you, and then I'll let Leslie let us learn about anything else on Tangle Grid, if you're in a real hurry, that is.
Yeah, I appreciate it. My wife needs me to help with the elevator stopped running in our building, so she needs me to help get our daughter upstairs. So.
Oh dear, that's what happened to the daughter, eh? Right, okay. You kicked him out for a while. Okay. Right. So any other thoughts? Any other things that come to mind? Maybe not necessarily connected to Globits that think is anything exciting happening, or.
I think I think Philip Rosedale posted, and I've gotten questions on, hey, what about cryptocurrencies for VR and protecting IP? I think Elon's written on that. I think that's an important subject. One is I think blockchain is something that has the potential to help. It's not guaranteed to fix everything about IP protection. It's kind of more opt-in. We'll see. I think it's great that people are looking at it. I haven't seen enough to know that it will work yet. And as far as cryptocurrency, that's something, because I'm interested, I'm exploring as well. For a long time, I've told folks it can't be fast, it can't be inexpensive, and it certainly can't be private. And I think it still probably can't be private, but there's some interesting perspectives of folks that you can, instead of doing a distributed, fully open consensus network, you can have 5 or 10 partners or one company that owns all of the nodes that approve transactions. And maybe that could be fast, and maybe that can be inexpensive. I'm not sure that you have any of the benefits that you plan to get out of it normally being an open system that anyone can run on and have access to the ledger and audit it. So I don't know enough yet. I'm starting to dig into those things. Like I said, Philip posted on it, and usually when he does, a lot of people think like, oh, this is definitely doable. And I'll at least propose that it's a path that maybe could be plausible, but I have not seen a cryptocurrency do that yet and be cheap and be fast. And to just give you a comparison, Bitcoin, from what I hear right now, takes at best minutes to close a transaction if you don't give money. You're lucky if things close in a half an hour, is what I've been told recently. And and now you're paying upwards of $80, $1.20 in fees if you want things to close quickly. And so it gives you an idea of some of the challenges. That's one of the more broadly used things. I don't know about Ethereum. I think they're faster. But for folks that are not necessarily technical people, even some that are, it's easy for people to make claims about any system. It is this, it is that. Think about what the hard questions are. Think about, what you need to ask. One thing I would say is just at least ask folks, hey, what's your expertise? And, and where did you get that information? Oh, I overheard it from someone, not great. Hey, I can point you toward this article that, was in Forbes magazine. Great. That's a great resource. Let me go take a look at that and read it for myself. And in this age of misinformation, sourcing is important. You probably all grew up in grade school where you had to write papers and it was a hassle to include 5 sources. And back then it was because you probably weren't putting research into your things. But when you read articles,
I scan the web every day from RSS feeds mainly for news and information, and I'm so used to it. But day by day now, I cancel some feeds and stuff like that because it's just instinct. I can tell what's coming in there is. It could be advertising, it could be spamming, sponsored promotions, or it can, as you say, just be complete. What do they call it? Reality, non-reality news, or fake reality, or something.
Alternate.
The trust. Alternate's a good site.
Yeah.
Sorry. But the trust is gone, I'm afraid.
Yeah. So anyway, don't be afraid to ask folks and to look at those things to see, when you read an article, like where is this linked to? When it makes a claim, anytime that someone or an article or a person makes a very bold, grandiose claim, sweeping claim,
check it out.
Ask. What we need to do as people is to start to demand that level of sourcing that someone can back up, what they say. Anyway, I need to run.
Well, one more question. One more question before you go, which I never asked you, and it's pretty obvious. When somebody wants to open a Globus account, they go to your website or maybe follow a link in Inworld if they've just installed a new Outworlds with the system in it. To put money into a Globus account, how do you set money? Presumably PayPal, credit cards. If they're putting their first $10 in, so investment.
Yeah, right. Right now it's PayPal or credit card. And we do have a couple of things that are grayed out right now. Amazon. We haven't had the time to update. We had Amazon running. We had a couple other flows running before, but at the moment it's via PayPal or via credit card. It's very simple purchase flow. It's all on one page. And that's how you'll get money in. Our dev site, dev.globit.com/opensim, should have the information for someone looking to install a grid. And there's a link to that from the main page of our website where you log in, www.globit.com. That's GLOEBIT. I do need to run. My wife is pinging me.
Yeah, I've been having you, Chris.
All right.
Come back again.
Yeah, absolutely. I wonder where we would have enough to talk about, but far from it.
No,
I'll
come back and we'll talk more. Thank you very much.
So thank you very much for coming, and we'll see you soon.
Thanks, Chris.
I'm sure James is coming the camera away. And actually, James, you might just want to focus. Is it still loaded on the Globit slide? It hasn't got the web address on it. Anyway, you picked it up just now, so no problem. Okay, now, in fact, in that case, I'll just flash back and give everybody another shot at the. Where's it gone? There we are, Halloween. Come on, Halloween, come back. Where's it gone?
Right there. There you go. I put it for you. Oh, I had it for you, and then you moved it.
Right.
There. Right there. Oh.
There we are. Right, leave it.
Yeah.
This is what happens when everybody clicks the thing at the same time. Right, okay. Oh, and now I've got a sunken head. Why is my head suddenly sunken? There we are. Okay. Yeah, so Leslie,
maybe, but sunken.
we opened, well, it was looking down on I was looking at my belt or something. Very undignified. Yes, I have done now. Thank you. I'm looking at you. Because I'm talking to you.
Okay.
Yes, I've mastered that trick. Right. Well, we opened the show by announcing the Halloween Expo that started today, of course, and you gave us a brief rundown. But I'm sure there's more to say. I had planned to switch back to you much earlier.
No, it was important information that Chris had to give.
Yes,
I can always come back again. There's no problem with that.
A great guest. And we got, even if we get down, I thought we were going techie into real techie
just
territory.
A little bit headachy right now, but I'll get over it.
I think people get the drift of these things.
Yeah.
They, like me, they don't fully understand some of the background. 6 weeks, the Halloween grid will be on. So you'll actually, I always keep saying at this time of year, Halloween is not All Hallows Eve anymore. In virtual worlds, it's the entire month of October. Let's face it.
Pretty much, yeah.
And if not longer, and then finally they have, no, we don't have fireworks. Well, we don't have bonfire night on the virtual world as well. And then it's all downhill to Thanksgivings and Christmases.
Downhill, he says. Mr. Scrooge.
Actually, for us, it's an exciting time because we got conferences galore. We got OSCC, and then we've got our new Hypergrid International Expo. So it's big.
Busy boy.
Yeah, but back to Tangle Grid though. So, anything else exciting going on there, or any info about the Halloween Expo that we didn't get in at the beginning there?
Well, it's just that I'm going to be planning for next year's. Right now, we only have the two left. We got the Halloween, and then after the Halloween is the Christmas one. So I'm planning for next year already, but we are a little bit disappointed still. We've been doing this 4 years, and people are just not... I get the visitors, but most of the stuff on that regions are something I've created or a few others, but there should be a lot more. This expo is not for Tango. This is not a Tango thing. This is for Hypergators. This is for any grid to come into one location instead of everybody hop, and showing what they can do for that theme. Okay, Halloween is not exactly but especially Christmas, you can make special Christmas trees, special outfits for Halloween or for Christmas, costumes. And we would love to have more people come on over, drop their stuff. Now that it's Globits, you can actually sell it instead of just people looking at it. Last 3 years, you just look. But now you can actually drop things and sell them. So, and we get a lot of visitors. There's no problem there. We had the safari a couple of weeks ago to the Steam one, and y'all had a blast, I'm assuming.
It's funny. I that very morning or the day before we came on safari, I think. No, I think it was on the show on the Sunday. I put up the poster, that we had in the display thing here, advertising the Steam Expo, and I was telling everybody, well, since the show's over, get over there quick because it's the last day. And lo and behold, Safari came round and it was still open. You obviously extended by a few days, so yeah, that was good. So I came on Safari and I came twice on Ryan Accord at earlier times. So.
But did you get a chance to go look at that city street that was there?
I think I looked at pretty much everything.
Outside the building?
Oh yeah, I mean, apart from the fact I was really taken by that thing in the dome that I couldn't buy or copy. Yeah, I went down just about every street. It was sort of there was masses there, or it felt like there was masses there. I mean, in camera view, it looked quite small, but when you actually got into the buildings and around the outside, there was loads there, and there was something up in the sky, if I remember too, which was not very noticeable until you went up in camera. So I thought it was pretty, I thought the steam one's pretty fun. Yeah.
Well, we had a full street there with the train coming through and all kinds of stuff. I don't know if you probably missed that.
I saw the train, I think. No, actually, I swear, because I go into camera mode to camera around. Mm-hmm. And I probably cameraed over every square inch of it and then zoomed into the interesting looking bits. And now one of my avatar did some actual walking too, though he tends to be lazy. But, I've mastered the art of camming. It's like this morning I went to the Greek Life Grid. And I visited something like 20 regions and took one photo in each. And the whole operation, actually didn't take as long as I say it did when I exaggerate. It's I'm just good at getting my camera and composing a shot, that looks more exciting than it really is sometimes. But I'm very good at doing that. I can cover a lot of ground very quickly.
No, it's just that I would like to see more participation from outside Tangle to this thing. And because, like I said, I'm scheduling for next year. I went down from 8 till 6 events this year. I don't want to cut it back anymore because you need different themes. The idea something for everybody.
It's like you own an expo hall. You want to keep it booked with lots of expos. So.
Well, it's for everybody else, not for Tangle. That's what I'm trying to get across. It's like the treasure hunt, the Open treasure hunt. Everybody's doing a hunt inside their grids, but when it comes to the whole metaverse, it just seems to die.
But that's another thing I was going to ask you about, any forthcoming treasure hunt. But staying with the contributors' point of view, let's call it contributors. I mean, when it comes to, say, Halloween right now, I can think, oh God, every grid on the hypergrid is opening Halloween regions for the season. And, they're so busy building those, they probably don't think, oh, I'll go and put, Halloween stuff on another grid as well. But when you've got like the Steam Expo, which isn't like a seasonal thing, it's not as though every grid is doing a Steampunk Expo at the same time. I'm curious to know why it might be that so many people are contributing. Because I look on something like OS Grid, not probably the best of grids to possibly around in, but masses of steampunk there. There are quite a few other grids where, there's steampunk regions, enclaves. And obviously they prioritize exhibits on their own grid and shops on their own grid. But can you think of a good reason why that, because let's say you're selling stuff particularly. Why wouldn't you want to put it for sale on as many places as possible? It doesn't make sense to me. Or show it off, even artists. You create to be seen. There are, many artists create for their own amusement, but at the end of the day, they still appreciate the number of people who look at their paintings, for example. But if you actually got something for sale, then you'd think you would be prioritizing outreach.
You'd think.
Yeah.
Like in Osgrid, there's now the Globits is there and can be used. There was no currency there except for, I think I saw one region many years ago at Vervox or whatever it's called. But they don't, as he's saying about the devs, Osgrid does not want commercial comms.
Yeah.
That's it, that's all. And that's why we've had to modify our module for money and get that from a third party because they don't want nothing to do with money.
Yeah.
End of story. Everything is free and this and that. And then they complain when they see their stuff on other grids. But you're putting it out there to be.
Oh, yeah. Well, no. There is free and there is free. And God forbid that somebody should nick it and put it on another grid.
What do you think is going to happen when you drop it on a region and then take that ore and drop it on another grid? What do you think is going to happen?
Well, I think in OSG, you see, the idea is you go visit a region, you take a copy of something for free, then you go to your own region next door and plonk it down there, so the two regions look the same.
Yeah, but
very boring.
In reality, the way I look at it, the region that's being hooked up is actually another grid. That's how I look at it.
Yeah.
Because they're not OS. They are hooked to OS. They're just sharing a few databases, if you will.
Yeah, exactly. It's very, I could be, this region could be hooked to us good if it wanted to instead of using the Outworlds install, but I didn't want that really. I wanted it to be.
No, because they'd clean you out.
Yeah, that's true.
I'm not just saying Osgrid. Metro's just as bad.
Oh, any
hookup grid.
Yeah, and actually, to be honest, at the back end too. But in fact, most of the stuff that happens on my Canadian grid is people from, oddly enough, Canada going there, and I set everything to take copy because I'm me. I haven't paid for half the stuff I've got there. It was free for me, so why can't I give it away free too? But people do that,
But if you took that stuff, that free stuff you're talking about, and you put it on this grid, and they came here and you said, "Oh, I got it for free, so why don't I give it for free?" You would be accused of copybotting.
Well, not if I can prove that I picked it up somewhere.
Other than this grid,
No, I mean, if I buy something that's got to be no mod or something for myself and res it on this grid, obviously it's something that can't be taken by anybody else because I obey all the the protocols and stuff.
You see what I'm saying?
I could use gold bars and take possession of it and then sell it. So I mean, it isn't impossible.
I'm talking about the freebie stuff that you're talking about. But that Osgrid, Metro, and all of these ones that are in these chats are yelling and screaming about copybotting.
Yeah.
That actually, 9 times out of 10, they're sitting on their region. They like the chair that they saw over on Buddy at Wainwright Plaza. They pick it up, they take it home, they drop it on the ground with a house, and then they say, "Well, I'm going to move over to Metro with my region." As soon as they disconnect from Oz and move to Metro, copybot.
Yeah. Well, that's
stealing because it's another grid.
I tend to try and be just pretty level-headed with this. As far as I'm saying, you give me a gift, much appreciated. I like it. Thank you, and 100 more thank yous.
Yeah.
You've given me that gift. I can take it where I want and do what I want with it. If everything is free, you go to a grid and they got a big thing of no commerce here. Everything is free, share and share alike. How can they possibly then accuse anybody of copybotting something that was free?
Copybotting. You see it in the G+ chats all over the place.
You can't steal a present that's been given to you for free. It's just not logical.
You're preaching to the choir, son, because I've been accused, or 10 Grid has been accused of that, but that's not true, what they're saying. Like he's saying someone's yakking about his tech stuff and how he did this and how he did that, and it's not true. But it's somebody who just wants to be a pain in the behind. That's all they are.
Yeah, well, it's like people will go on and on about nothing for ages if you let them. Some people, but it's I mean, to me, it's obvious. I mean, I don't think I've got it anymore. But on an old machine, I actually had a viewer that is a copybot viewer. It wasn't marketed as that. It was given to me by a very, very well-respected, trusted company who used to do commercial things in Second Life. And the reason they made their own viewer was to facilitate, copying and moving stuff of their own. Right. But, but there came a point where it was not allowed as a Linden Lab viewer anymore, because if you abused this, and it really was only the company people that had it, it still qualified as a viewer that could, it could basically take a no copy, no perms item and copy it and take it away. Now, that was copybotting. It was a viewer that was built to hijack all that code and permissions. And that is illegal. I mean, even if, the moment you use it for that, it becomes illegal. It's a bit like people are going on about Kodi, showing streaming illegal programs. It's not Kodi that's doing it. It's people that are making apps that you can install on Kodi. Unless you willingly install the app, and then use it to break the law, you're not actually breaking the law, if you see what I mean.
Yeah.
So, it's just logic. I mean, if I have a copybot viewer for a legitimate purpose and don't use it for copybotting, then fair's fair. The moment I use it to copybot and do something illegal, then I'm in trouble. Well, I should be in trouble.
Yeah, but a lot of the so-called copybotting isn't.
Yeah.
This is my point. They yell and scream that so-and-so copybotted this and so-and-so copybotted this. 9 times out of 10, you get it from Osgrid, which was copybotted from SL, and they want me, as a grid owner, to track that item down. Why? I have no clue how many grids it went through before it even landed on mine.
Yeah. No, I don't think that's remotely practical. I mean, I think all you can do, or any owner of an item can do in their inventory, is if somebody approaches you and say, that's mine, it was copyright and it must have been copybotted, you don't accuse me of copybotting of it, but you do ask me where I got it from. And if somebody's that concerned, they can track back down the chain until they find the original person who must have copybotted. But it's hard work, and for something that's
worth maybe 25 cents in real life.
Yeah, exactly. It is just not worth it.
And these threats of lawyers and that, it's going to cost you, what, $5,000 for a lawyer to fight for 25 cents.
Yeah, most criminals, quite frankly, are business people. I mean, they don't, they just don't want to pay taxes. Almost, they don't do it if the risk is too high or if it's petty. You want to rob a bank, you want to go away with a couple of £1 million. You don't want to go with a couple of cents of spare change, which is all they had in the pull-out till. I presume not. Anyway, the risk factor is just not worth it.
All I'm saying is that I'm getting a little bit tired of people like him there, of people saying you copybotted this or you stole that, when not just me. I'm talking about every grid. Every grid out there. I've seen stories on HG News where one grid was accused of region after region after region, and the poor guy's going like, hello, how do I know where that came from? Yeah. I'm not standing on everybody's region going through every one of their prims saying, well, that looks copybotted or that looks stolen. Especially in regions like SL or Aviation when they were full blast.
I was talking to Cesar Amber about this recently. We weren't talking about copybotting, but we were talking about our sensibilities as designers. I've got 25 regions, or it's all one, but it's a vast thing here. It's going to take ages to fill it all up. There's very few things anywhere in this region that are genuinely mine that I built or I had. I just collect things. Not everything, but things I think, oh, that palm tree will be useful in my palm tree thing or whatever. And as long as it is copyable and free, fair enough. Right. The art of it, as Cesar was saying, and other people agree, is that as a designer, you use those components and you put together something unique. So people come here and they don't see, oh, that's just like so-and-so and it's copybotted. Mm-hmm. And I'm afraid to say it, there are whole destinations on the hypergrid that I land on and think, oh, why the hell is this here? Because I think it's an inch by inch almost copy of another hypergrid region I've been to. Yeah. People pick stuff up and they think that looks nice. They pick up all the important bits, take them back to the region. They put them down the same way. They model it the same way. They think, now I've got that for me. But in fact, all they're doing is trying to make a copy of, something they like.
I've already seen,
but people are going to do it. I think it's what, it happens with Linda Kelly's, material. There's no copybotting or anything going on there.
No, she's full open license to do what you want with it.
But everybody, you keep going to sims that look the same because everybody's been to Linda Kelly and picked up the same buildings. And
I've had people
Second Life, for all its vastness. I'm forever stumbling into places in Second Life when I rarely go there now that just look the same as some other place in Second Life. It's like, they all go to the same vendors or something, or they're all inspired by other sims rather than come up with their own. There may be a massive volume of users there and a massive volume of land, but there isn't actually much originality there anymore that you haven't seen already, kind of thing. So, you know, it's a curiosity, you know, really. But I don't know, you know, I just draw the line between what is clearly deliberate theft, which is designed to make money as a business for the person stealing it, or, you know, casual copying. I mean, if it's copyable, it's copyable. You can always make it no copy, you know, and then anybody copying it would definitely have to be using illegal software to do it.
Yep.
So, figure.
Yep.
You know, I can't come up to you because you've got a blue flower on, somebody's put a blue flower on one of your regions, and I reckon I made that blue file 20 years ago in Second Life. Come on.
I've had it. Yeah,
how is anybody, for the sake of a little blue flower, going to track back?
Oh, you should hear. Oh, Lordy. That's copyrighted, and it was almost like a flower.
Yeah.
It was a big Chat G+. It was actually a sign I made. I found it on Google+. It was avatars. Okay?
Yeah.
I use it for my newbie welcome center so they can get their avatars when they first land, just in case the viewer didn't pick up the avatar, the starter avatar, so they're not clouds, because sometimes I don't know what's wrong with my software, or if it's an OpenSim problem, I don't know. But anyways, it was a sign, just a texture. The comments that I got on G+, because that was something they saw in Second Life, you don't want to know.
Yeah, I can believe.
And it wasn't copyrighted. I checked, it wasn't copyrighted, none of that stuff. But because it was in Second Life, they made a big stink out of it. Absolutely.
And I think a lot of these people, you know, I was talking to this about Chris, and we obviously don't mention names here, but off the show the other day we were talking, you know, and, you know, there is this problem with what was clearly a tiny, tiny minority of people who just seem to love the sound of their own voice, regardless of whether they know what they're talking about or not. And the sad thing is, in this day and age of falsehoods and everything else, being supposed truths and what, you know, were things Chris was hinting at there, you know, it can be very damaging, even though, you know, this may be one person in 1,000 who's got a big mouth and just has to blabber their head off about something and be obnoxious every way they can get their voice in. And, you know, if you view that as, oh, ignore it, it's just some asshole, you know, likes to sound with his own voice. But no, we're adult program. Anyway, that's all. I can do better than that if you really want.
No.
But, you know, that's the way I think most people would normally have taken it, you know, but with the capacity for people like this to get high volume, you know, to put themselves in high volume places, you know, they're more of a nuisance than being one in 1,000. You know, they have latched onto visibility. You know, most people, you know, you've got 1,000 users, 990% are more than happy with you. They're so happy that they have no cause to complain.
But
and one of them is a bit unhappy and complains and makes it loud.
Yeah, and spoils it for the other 990.
Yeah, exactly.
And all of a sudden they start believing that fool.
Yeah, and but proportionately, you know, he's no one, you know. So I don't know, you know, it's like be careful reading the web these days. You know, the trust element of what you read and listen to online is just gone. You've got to be very careful about.
You have to go. In my case, you have to go to the grid. You have to see for yourself. You have to talk to others that have been there for a while. Do not take the word of some jackrabbit, I could say stronger too, but I won't, that this is going on that grid. That person has never stepped foot on my grid and has the nerve to call me whatever they called me and did whatever they did, that I did this. It makes me wild.
They probably, you know, I'll give an example of absurdity here, right? They may have seen a photo supposedly taken on your grid or something, which had what they think is some kind of copy-botted thing in it. But I'll tell you that I at the moment I'm posting a photo a day from here because well, what the hell? It just goes up to Flickr. It's a way. It's another avenue. But I take far more photos for myself. But offline in Photoshop, for example, I will rarely retouch something, but I like doing montages too. So I will occasionally have, a foreground scene from one photograph, mix it with middle ground things from other photographs, and then have a background sky or horizon that comes from another photograph. And I'll make up a fantasy scene that is a complete fiction. Then I will run a filter on it to make it look like art. Like it was painted. It's justifiable. Electronic tools to do the job. At the end of the day, I have a nice aesthetic to look at. So what the hell, how it was made. But the thing is, I could actually take a photograph in Tangle Grid, yeah? And then before putting it on the web, I could go into Photoshop and I could montage a Second Life flower into the corner.
Oh, Lord.
Oh,
Mel, you put that on air? Now you're giving them ideas. Holy Lord.
Yeah, no, but I'm also pointing out, sorry, this is a problem with pointing out. By pointing out the absurdity, I should maybe some idiot will think that's a great idea, but that's the absurdity of what we're talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
And I bet you the petals on the flower were texture somebody nicked from a real world photograph in the first place.
Yeah, exactly.
Didn't get permission.
Exactly.
Yeah. So go figure, really.
Anyways, we're running 3 hours here.
Yes, okay, and we were talking about Tangle Grid. So anyway, the Halloween Expo is now on.
Yes, please come and drop your stuff. Get a hold of me. You got lots of room.
And anybody who can give us ideas, as how that Leslie and other grids, by the way, can get hypergrid traffic to events. I mean, we can take safaris there and things like that, but I see, as I said, I see the difference between, say, Steam Expo, which is a theme that is universal and happening all the while. So great place to have an expo. Halloween, maybe everybody else is doing a Halloween and they're too busy.
Yeah, but it's also something to come and look at, and you can also get some ideas for yourself to how you want to set things up without copying it, actually. But
exactly. You might be allowed to copy some of it to put on your own Halloween build, or you might.
We also have rides on the Halloween one, the haunted houses and stuff. So it's not just to look at, there's actually activities to do.
And with a Globus account, you might even be able to buy.
You can buy some skeleton or a coffin, and then you really can put a finger up. So anybody says you copy-botted, no, I bought that. I bought it with my Globus. Exactly. And the Christmas one's coming, and it also has lots of rides and a snow house that you can take a sleigh ride over the region and stuff like that. So that's coming after the expo for the Halloween, so keep an eye out for that.
Okay. Yeah, wonderful. And of course, I'm just going to our main images today didn't really get used because they're all in Greece and he's not here. But I'm just going to put up another reminder. Hypergrid International Expo will be happening 16th, 17th of December. If you go look up HIE.DDNSS.org, you can find our website, and the weekend before that is this one. No, it's that one. Come on, I don't know how to operate my screen. What's going on here? It's
copy-botted it. That's what's wrong.
Yeah, it's kind of drawing itself at a slightly different pace for me. There we are. The weekend before, 9th and 10th, we have the Open Simulator Community Conference as well. Proposals are still open for about 2 days, though, if I recall. They have been coming in thickish and fastish, but there's still space for more if you have panels, presentations, you name it. So 2 big end-of-year conferences to compete with the Christmas Expo. I guess by that time, I don't know. Rather a different cup of tea. But are you going to be involved in there? Those have you put submissions in?
No, I didn't. Sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, busy, busy, busy. Yeah, know the feeling. I'm busy with them.
That's all you do, though.
Yeah, exactly. I don't run a grid. Well, actually, I do run a grid sort of now, but not in any way that takes my time. It's my hobby to landscape.
Exactly.
You know, it's my newest hobby is landscaping in 3D, and then taking photographs that I pretend to
pulling the ducks out of the.
Yeah, and then I post photographs from Inworld and say, "Hey, look at my art. It's a painting."
There you go.
I reckon some people think that. You know, I'm getting people following the daily what's it, and they don't seem to have any connection to virtual worlds whatsoever. They obviously just like the pictures, you know, green foliage and bumpy hills and stuff. Well, hell, yeah, cool. Yeah. Okay, right. Well, I think we'll quite a wrap. James, I should add, any closing thoughts from you?
No, but again, not much on the chat, but it's funny. We have more viewers now than we had at the beginning of the 3-hour period.
I think maybe it's a time zone thing.
Yeah, maybe so.
I notice even though we don't necessarily get the live chat. I mean, I get the impression people are tuned in, and then they send IMs or whatever to their friends. And get, you know.
Well, that's what I do when I get the link from you guys. I put it in a notice for my whole grid to watch, so you get the numbers growing after, and then they put the comments at the bottom underneath where you can add comments.
It just picks up slowly. You know, imagine we're a 24-hour channel. You know, we'd have millions of viewers coming in one by one every hour. Yeah. But no such luck. We are a long show though, and I think it pays off in a way. So, that's good news. We've probably got the whole of Tangle Grid watching. That's the fun thing about having guests, isn't it?
Yeah.
All their followers come in and join us.
You wonder what I'm going to say next. You always worry.
That's why I always make a remark about, say, hey folks, comment if you want to. You know, I don't do it at the beginning because I reckon people have only just got the link and they miss the intros. So I sort of bring it in when I think people have arrived and say, by the way, if you're watching this, look, there's a box where you can comment too.
It might not hurt to toss that in every half hour or so.
Yeah, but I reckon a lot of people don't even look. They just wander around listening, like they're doing replays, and other people just enjoy watching and can't be bothered to say anything. You know, it's like television. No, I don't talk back to it, do I? Right. Anyway, who cares? Who knows? Well, I do care. I do know, but that's beside the point. Okay. Well, I think we'll call it a wrap. If you haven't been watching this live, and are watching a replay, then you're already watching it in replay. But I will tell you that replays are available throughout the week and throughout eternity. In fact, going way back when on YouTube. And this particular show is also available as an audio-only podcast in about 24 hours at slartist.com. So you can get an audio-only version of it there too. You won't be able to see the pictures, but you'll be able to hear all the nonsense we talk about.
Jeez, you won't be able to see me sticking my tongue out.
Well, if you drive, if you've got a 3-hour drive to work in the car tomorrow morning, you can download the podcast and listen in your headphones while you're driving. I think that's still legal, isn't it?
Yes.
I don't know. Right.
And it's free.
Yeah, and it's free. Yeah, and you won't be breaking the law. Yeah, very good. Very good. Okay, so I'm going to call it a wrap. I'd like to thank, I know he's gone now, but I'd like to thank again Christopher Colosi from Globis, great guest, and certainly had enough to talk about. And hopefully we'll see him soon, maybe even before OCC. Thank you to Leslie Kling here from Tangle Grid. Don't forget the Halloween Expo, which opened today.
If anything, come and take a look. You never know what you might find.
Well, all you got to do is hop over there and give yourself...
There is things giving... people are giving stuff away, so you might want to come over and grab...
I will. It'll be on my list of places to jump over to, and then probably in another 2 months we'll end up with Elvis Safari again too. But
I like that.
I try to keep an eye on the things that are opening, and then give it a couple of days to calm down, and then turn up. You know, I like being places with 1 or 2 other people, or maybe none, so that I can camera around at my leisure and take things. Yeah, exactly. And thanks also, of course, to James Out Loud, multitasking on our cameras, monitoring our chat that didn't exist, and for sitting here as well. Thank you, James.
Glad to do it, Mel. It's something I really enjoy.
Okay, wonderful. And before we all collapse in giggles, I don't know why. No obvious cause, but maybe it's just tiredness and exhaustion. I will wish you, I'm going to better turn my face to the camera again, haven't I? There we are. I wish you all a very good morning, a very good afternoon, a very good evening, and indeed a good tomorrow, depending on wherever and whenever you are. We're out of here, but we'll be back next week, same time, same place. We'll see you then. Bye-bye.